Chapter 622. Madame Ma's hands trembled. She bowed and held Pang Zhao's face. She rubbed her thumb on his cheek and confirmed that his skin was warm. This was indeed her beloved grandson. Tears blurred her vision again. She was so excited that she didn't forget to lower her voice. Dai Fu, you're finally back. You stinky child. Do you know that you almost scared your grandmother to death? Madame Ma had a strong personality. Pang Zhao had never seen her on the verge of collapse. He couldn't help but feel sour and almost shed tears. Pang Zhao rubbed his face against Madame Ma's hand. Grandmother, don't be sad. I'm fine. Not only am I fine, but your Majesty is also fine. Under Pang Zhao's intentional reminder, Madame Ma's heart trembled. She gradually calmed down and looked at the person dressed like a banshee. If it wasn't your Majesty, who else could it be? Madame Ma bit her cheeks and tried her best to not show any abnormality. She bowed to Li Qitian. Greetings to your Majesty. I'm old and dim-sighted. I was too excited to see Dai Fu and was impolite for a moment. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Li Qitian supported her with both hands and said with a smile, Old madam, you don't have to be so polite. We're all family. Jishi and I have always been on the same side. It's just that we have to disturb your residence now, Madame Ma smiled honestly. There's no need to disturb. It's our honor. You haven't eaten yet, right? How about this, I'll order people to prepare food and wash clothes. Looking at Ji Ziyu covered in mud, Pang Zhao and Li Qitian also in a sorry state, Madame Ma said with heartache, Ah, you've all suffered. Qin Yining held his waist and whispered to Madame Ma, Grandmother, it's not appropriate to spread the news that your Majesty and Dai Fu were saved. Don't let it slip when you go out. If anyone asks, just say that Marquis Dingbei sent me back and asked me to stay for a meal to express his gratitude. Madame Ma nodded seriously, yes, grandmother knows. Don't worry. In a moment, when I have finished preparing everything, I will set up a meal in the front hall and let the in-laws entertain North Marquis outside. Your Majesty will have to suffer a bit and eat in Si Qin Garden. Li Qitian was overjoyed. He smiled and said, Thank you for being so considerate. Your Majesty, you don't have to be so courteous. I don't deserve it. Madame Ma's etiquette was thorough. Then, she turned around and left to make arrangements. Not long after, Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou came back with a change of clothes. Seeing that Pang Zhao had returned, Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou were so happy that they jumped. Qin Yining had to give them some instructions. The two of them were loyal and devoted to Qin Yining and knew how to act appropriately. They immediately understood what to do. Pang Zhao led Li Qitian and Ji Ziyu to take a detour to the prepared clean room at the back of the house to bathe and change clothes. The three men were originally military men. In their early years, they fought on the battlefield together. Through wind and rain, they went through mountains of corpses and seas of blood together. However, after enjoying wealth and honor, their minds changed. Now, the three of them were like mud monkeys. If a ladle of warm water was poured down, the water would directly turn black. The three men looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. The barrier between Li Qitian and Pang Zhao was almost non-existent at this time. Li Qitian said in a low voice, The three of us were the ones who conquered the world. Now, it's the three of us again. Pang Zhao wrapped a towel around his palm and rubbed it on his body. Hearing this, he couldn't help but laugh, isn't that so? It's difficult to conquer the country, but it's even more difficult to rule the country. However, Your Majesty, don't worry. Our loyalty hasn't changed. We are still as loyal as before. Ji Ziyu also nodded. His long hair that had been washed was tied up behind his head. Drops of water slid down his back that was as white as jade but covered with scars. The three of them were all covered with scars. Li Qitian was slightly better, but he also had some scars. Both Pang Xiao and Li Qitian had scars on their chests and backs from the fatal wounds that had almost taken their lives. Li Qitian looked at the two of them. His heart was full of mixed feelings. For a moment, he even felt that he was wrong to be suspicious of the two of them and to have the intention to kill Pang Xiao. Previously, they fought so fiercely. Now, he was forced by the situation to hide in Prince Zhongshuan's residence. He didn't know how to proceed in the future. Li Qitian sighed in melancholy. The three of them continued to scrub. Qin Yining also washed and changed her clothes. While the three of them were bathing, she went to the front hall to see Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Today, I had some abdominal pain on the mountain. Fortunately, Marquis Dingbei sent me down the mountain. Father, please help me treat the guests well." "Thank you, Marquis Dingbei." Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Yining's face. He saw that her face was glowing and her eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. It was as if the suffering of the past few days had been swept away. He knew what was going on. To be able to make his daughter so happy, Pang Xiao must have good news. Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "Don't worry. Father will help you treat the guests later." "Thank you, Father. After dinner, Father, come to my place. I still have something to discuss with Father." Qin Huayuan's heart moved. He nodded and said, "I understand." Qin Yining and Madame Ma personally watched the servants prepare the food and wine. Then, they returned to see Qin Garden. After washing his face, Ji Ziyu neatly tied his ink-black hair into a high ponytail at the back of his head. He changed into a set of sapphire blue embroidered arrow sleeves robes that Pang Xiao had not yet worn. A jade belt was tied around his waist. Ji Ziyu was led by a maidservant to the front hall. Ji Ziyu was born with a fair complexion. His appearance was also beautiful, but his figure was similar to Pang Xiao's. When he wore this gorgeous embroidered robe, it gave him a cold and frosty beauty. Seeing Qin Huayuan, Ji Ziyu first cupped his hands and bowed, "Uncle Qin." "North Pacifying Marquis, don't be like this. Please sit." After Ji Ziyu sat down, he began to eat with Qin Huayuan. The two of them talked about what happened in the mountains. Ji Ziyu only said that he would continue to dig tomorrow. Qin Huayuan also cooperated with him and expressed his melancholy and anxiousness. After Ji Ziyu finished eating, he said his goodbyes. Qin Huayuan specially ordered people to prepare a good horse for Ji Ziyu. After Ji Ziyu left on his horse, Qin Huayuan had the servants carry him to see Qin Garden. And a group of people who were secretly monitoring outside the palace told the news to the eldest princess's palace. Replying to the eldest princess, Prince Consort Ji personally sent Prince Zhongshuan's consort back to the palace today. When she went in, she was covered in mud. When she came out, she not only took a bath, but also changed into a new set of clothes. It seems like Prince Consort Ji's mood is quite good. Li Helan had been in a very bad mood these past 2 days. She didn't know if her imperial brother was dead or alive, so she had a bad premonition. However, her imperial mother was not the same as before and refused to listen to her. Ji Ziyu was becoming more and more cold to her and did not treat her imperial mother with respect. That day, he had publicly humiliated the servants of Ci and palace, and it was not the first time. That was the same as slapping the Empress Dowager in front of everyone. Later, in order to Qin Yining that slut's father, Ji Ziyu went against her own uncle. Her uncle had stolen Ji Ziyu's command of the Tiger Army. She was indeed dissatisfied with this matter, but that was her imperial mother's arrangement and she had no other choice. However, Ji Xiu was not willing to give face to her maternal uncle and did not put her in his eyes. Thinking back to the past few days, Ji Xiu's eyes were cold when he saw her as if she was a stranger. Hearing the servant's words, Li Helan thought of how Ji Xiu had arranged for his personal guards to clash with the Marquis of Qingyang in order to protect the palace. She couldn't help but feel sour inside. She asked in a cold voice, "Is what you said true?" Prince Consort Ji really went to the palace to change into a new set of clothes. "It's the middle of the night, did you see wrongly?" The spies quickly shook their heads. This one did not see wrongly. Prince Consort Ji really did send the princess consort back to the palace and stayed inside for about 2 hours. Li Helan gritted her teeth in anger. He had never seen Ji Xiu give her any face, but he had the patience to go to the palace to accompany his friend's wife and even changed his clothes there. It was so dark, what did he do? Could it be that Ji Xiu had taken a liking to Qin Yining, that seductress? Li Helan looked at herself in the mirror and then thought of Qin Yining's appearance. She angrily slapped the table. Such a fox! You still don't forget to seduce men even when you're pregnant. Eldest princess. This one. He did not say that Ji Xiu and the Prince Zhongshuan's consort had that kind of relationship. Why did the eldest princess think wrongly? If the prince consort knew of this, wouldn't he be considered a person who stirred up trouble? The spies finally realized how much ambiguity their words had created. They quickly wanted to fix it, but the eldest princess did not give them time. She waved her hand and had them leave. While Li Helan was filled with anger and wanted to kill someone, they had already finished eating dinner in Si Qin Garden. Qin Huayuan was eating dinner with Li Qitian. During this time, he calmly told her what had happened in the capital during the 20 days they were trapped in the underground palace. Because he was no longer an official of the court, Qin Yining did not say much of the information that Qin Huayuan had gathered. He only said what normal people in the capital could see. But even like this, Li Qitian was so angry that she lost her appetite. The actions of the Empress Dowager and Empress had greatly disappointed Li Qitian. Qin Yining had the servants clear the table and have them bring in tea. Seeing that the atmosphere was still very serious, Qin Yining tried to persuade her, "Your Majesty, please calm down. It seems like the Empress Dowager has no other choice. Your Majesty is trapped in the underground palace and the Empress Dowager can only hold power in her own hands to ensure that the country does not change hands. This is also for Your Majesty to protect the country. It's a good thing that Your Majesty is fine, so there is still time." Hearing Qin Yining say this, Li Qitian calmed down and analyzed it. There was indeed this layer of meaning. Moreover, now was not the time to blame the Empress Dowager. Li Qitian said, "If we want to restore this one's identity, the first thing is to let the Empress Dowager know that this one is still alive. I believe that with this one here, Mother would not be willing to give her power to others. Your Majesty's words are correct." Pang Xiao nodded and then said, "Prince Li has already made his decision. If Your Majesty appears, he will definitely think of a way to stop you. It is best to find a way to bypass Prince Li's eyes and let the Empress Dowager know that Your Majesty is fine." Chapter 623. No one present was stupid. Hearing this, they immediately understood what Qin Yining meant. Before Pang Xiao could say anything, Li Qitian had already nodded with a smile. "If sister-in-law is willing to do it, it will be much easier. You just need to pass a token into the palace and say that you want to pay respects to the Empress. Seeing that Jishi and I are trapped in the underground palace together, the Empress Dowager will definitely see you. At that time, you will be able to make things clear." The more Li Qitian spoke, the more excited his tone became. He looked at Qin Yining with eyes full of expectation. Qin Yining also smiled and nodded, "Your Majesty is right." However, Pang Xiao felt that something was wrong. if it can be that easy, of course, it will be good. I'm afraid that the palace is not safe now. If we act rashly, won't we implicate the Empress Dowager? In fact, Peng Xiao was worried that Qin Yining would be implicated. Once Qin Yining entered the palace and was detained by Prince Li's people, wouldn't she be in danger again? However, as a loyal and patriotic person, it was not convenient for him to say this. Qin Yining naturally knew Peng Xiao's worries. However, since Peng Xiao did not kill the emperor in the underground palace and now brought him back, it was impossible for her to ignore the emperor's matter. She must help him stabilize the country. Qin Yining did not know how Peng Xiao analyzed the situation, but she felt that if she had the chance to kill Li Qitian, she would not do it. In the current situation, Li Qitian being alive was the biggest advantage for them. First, a new emperor brings in new officials. If someone else was in that position, their situation might be even worse. Second, if Li Qitian did not unite the various factions in Dezhou, facing the iron hooves of the Titan, it was only a matter of time before they were attacked into the capital. Facing the Titan, Peng Xiao would still have no advantage. Moreover, a Nari Khan was killed by her. The Titan hated them to the bone. When the time came, they would definitely face a storm. From Qin Yining's point of view, for the sake of stability, supporting Li Qitian to return to the throne was the best choice for them. I think we can do this matter with 2 legs. Qin Yining made up her mind and spoke her thoughts in a low voice. Qin Huaiyuan nodded repeatedly as he listened to the conversation. He also made some suggestions in a low voice from time to time. Peng Xiao and Li Qitian also expressed their opinions. After a round of discussion, the plan was decided in less than 2 incense sticks worth of time. At this time, Li Qitian looked at Qin Yining with an irrepressible passion in her eyes. Why wasn't such a smart woman his wife? Why wasn't he as lucky as Peng Xiao? Thinking of his empress who still hadn't done anything, Li Qitian couldn't help but feel annoyed. After everything was discussed properly, Qin Yining gave up the main room of Si Qin Garden for Li Qitian to live in. The couple moved to the room next to Madame Ma's. Qin Huaiyuan left Si Qin Garden as usual. According to the plan, he did not leak the news of Li Qitian being rescued. He asked Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou to pay attention to the servants and not allow them to reveal the slightest information. After watching the 2 of them leave, Qin Yining leaned tiredly in Peng Xiao's arms. There was only a silk lamp lit in the room. The dim light shone into the bed through a layer of gauze curtain, so they couldn't see each other clearly. Peng Xiao hugged her from behind. His big hand carefully covered her belly, which had become bigger. He carefully sniffed her neck and the side of her face. Finally, he buried his face in her shoulder and hair. His hot breath sprayed on her shoulder. Sister E, I miss you so much. Qin Yining's nose twitched when she heard this, and tears almost fell. Me too. Fortunately, you are safe and sound. This time, it was scary but not dangerous. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. Peng Xiao heard her muffled voice, so he moved closer to her. Seeing the sparkling and translucent tears on her cheeks, his heart ached to the extreme. Sister E, it's my fault. I'm the one who made you so worried. I was actually very anxious inside. I thought, what if I couldn't get out? What would you do? I was worried that something might happen to you, but I also know that you are a smart girl. You are responsible. You won't ignore our family. You will give birth to the child and raise it. It's just that no one will understand the pain in your heart. You can only hide your feelings and then pretend to be strong in front of others. Peng Xiao's lips were dry and cracked in a few places. He fell on Qin Yining's cheek and kissed her tears dry. Qin Yining smiled, but more tears flowed down her cheeks. Fortunately, God has mercy. Yes, fortunately, God has mercy. Pang Xiao hugged her and sighed with satisfaction. Then he asked, what happened these days? You didn't encounter any trouble, right? Qin Yining thought about it and did not mention the Tianjizi matter. He only said that Marquis Qingyang wanted to come to the residence to capture Qin Huayuan, but Ji Ziyu arranged for people to protect him. When we return, we should properly thank Marquis Dingbei. Pang Xiao was moved by this and nodded, I understand. Qin Yining asked again, did you encounter any danger in the underground palace? There was no food or drink in there. How did you persist for so many days? Look at you, you've lost a lot of weight. Pang Xiao smiled. Just like Qin Yining, he did not mention the various hardships in the underground palace. He only said, fortunately, there are people guarding the underground palace all year round. The tributes inside have been changed recently. Although the fruit made from oil and flour does not taste good, it is not difficult to fill the stomach. There is also underground spring water, so you won't get thirsty. That's better. It's just that in that kind of environment, you can't be sure if someone will come to rescue you. It is truly torturous. No. I'm not worried about that. Pang Zhao's index finger wiped the tear stains on Qin Yining's face. He smiled and said, because I know that you and Jilan will do everything you can to rescue me. Even if everyone else gives up, you two will continue to dig. As long as I can preserve my strength and survive, I will definitely be able to wait for your rescue. Qin Yining heard this and felt much more at ease. He smiled and nodded. He leaned on Pang Zhao's shoulder and gave him all his weight. In the dead of night, the two whispered to each other. After talking for a while, they unknowingly fell asleep. The next day, Qin Yining got up and had a meal. He then ordered someone to prepare a carriage. Wang Yi is safe at home. Today, I still have to go up the mountain with Marquis Dingbei to put on a play. I also want to check out the situation. This was what he had discussed with Ji Ziyu yesterday. Although Pang Xiao couldn't bear to let Qin Yining be tired from the long journey, he had no choice but to nod. Qin Yining brought along the Bing Tang and Ji Yun's clothes. Under the escort of the imperial bodyguards, they went all the way to Mtizhuangshan. Pang Xiao secretly acted according to the plan they had decided on last night. When Qin Yining arrived at Mtizhuangshan, Ji Ziyu had also just arrived. The foot of the mountain was still surrounded by people from the warden's office. When they saw Ji Ziyu and Qin Yining arrive, they immediately blocked their way. Ji Ziyu waved his horsewhip and said coldly, "What, you said you were going to catch a Taitan spy? What, you don't even recognize this marquis?" Yesterday, their brothers had been whipped because they tried to stop Ji Ziyu. They were afraid. Moreover, after they went up the mountain, they didn't find the person they were looking for. It was inevitable that they felt guilty. The leader braced himself and said, "This Prince Consort Ji is naturally not a spy." The person in the carriage, Qin Yining, frowned and lifted the curtain. His delicate face was filled with anger. His long eyebrows were tightly knitted and his eyes were sullen. It was dark yesterday. It's fine if you wanted to go closer to search. Now that the sky is bright, you still can't see clearly. I am the Prince Zhongshuan's consort, not a Taitan. If you can't even see this clearly, then don't work in the warden's office. Everyone's faces turned red from being reprimanded. They were stunned for a moment. Qin Yining lowered the curtain and said, "Go up the mountain." Ji Ziyu urged his horse to continue going up the mountain. The people from the warden's office couldn't be thick-skinned and chase after them. They thought that since they were going up the mountain, how could the person they were searching for be in a carriage back up the mountain? Therefore, they didn't search Qin Yining's carriage in detail. They also didn't discover that Qin Yining was alone in the carriage. The carriage smoothly arrived at the scene of the incident. The originally noisy sounds of digging and shouting had completely disappeared. There were people whispering on the mountain, but no one was digging. Qin Yining felt that something wasn't right. After getting off the carriage, Qin Yining and Ji Ziyu looked at each other and walked around a few large trees that blocked their view towards the scene of the excavation. From afar, they saw that the men they had arranged to dig on the mountain were all gathered together, either sitting or lying down dejectedly. They were surrounded by the people from the warden's office. Ji Ziyu said, "Follow the original arrangement. You guys split into groups and continue digging. Your Majesty is trapped in the underground palace. Our rescue can't be delayed for even a moment." "Yes." Seeing that Ji Ziyu had arrived, everyone felt reassured and immediately got up to pick up shovels and other tools. "Wait. Don't move." The people from the warden's office who had surrounded them immediately became chaotic. They shouted loudly and didn't allow the people to continue digging. Ji Ziyu coldly reprimanded, "What is the meaning of this? Your Majesty's life is now in danger, but you have the leisure to stop us here. Can you bear the responsibility for delaying the rescue of your Majesty?" He narrowed his eyes and sneered, "Don't tell me you don't want your Majesty to be rescued. Are you disloyal, or is it your superior who is disloyal?" The more Ji Ziyu spoke, the colder his gaze became. The people couldn't withstand Ji Ziyu's sharp gaze, but they also couldn't bear the accusation of obstructing the rescue of your Majesty. They could only relent and no longer stop the excavation. Ji Ziyu arranged for the people to continue digging at the original location. Ji Ziyu stood in place and watched for a moment. When he was sure that everyone was working in peace, he glanced at a few people from the warden's office from the corner of his eye. Ji Ziyu said unhappily, "Why aren't you leaving? There are no Taitan spies on the mountain, but you are dawdling here. Don't you really want to rescue your Majesty?" "Of course not." Everyone said at once, "We are wholeheartedly serving the country and the people." Ji Ziyu sneered, "How noble. If so, your Majesty will return and the country will be stable. What's wrong with the people and the country? Don't tell me you are not leaving because you want to take the opportunity to harm your Majesty." "Prince Consort Ji, don't talk nonsense." Everyone's faces turned red. They couldn't win against Ji Ziyu in terms of reasoning and didn't know how to get out of this situation. Ji Ziyu chuckled. He didn't want to bother with this person anymore and didn't say a word. No one dared to continue to obstruct the excavation, afraid that they would be labeled as traitors and implicate their families. Besides, they had already done what Prince Li had instructed them to do. If they continued to argue, they would only be asking for trouble. They still had to go back and report. Thinking of this, the people from the warden's office left. Chapter 624. When Qin Yining returned to the Wangfu, he removed the threshold and opened the door. The carriage then went straight to the inner residence without any obstructions. In the carriage, Qin Yining explained the situation in the Wangfu to Bing Tang and Ji Yun in a low voice. He instructed, "You have to be careful about this matter. Don't leak it out." "Yes. Wang Fei, don't worry. We understand the severity of the matter. We will be careful. We won't do anything bad." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Of course I won't worry. Last night was hard on you. The night wind on the mountain is cold. Don't catch a cold. I asked them to prepare ginger soup and a pot of ginseng chicken soup. You have to eat some." Ji Yun and Bing Tang felt warm in their hearts. They smiled and nodded. Bing Tang smiled and said, "Wang Fei loves to worry. How can we catch a cold?" Qin Yining smiled and teased, "It's not that we can't catch a cold. Huzi is on the mountain. How can he bear to let you catch a cold?" Bing Tang's face turned red. She glared at Qin Yining with a red face and ears. Wang Fei, you're getting worse and worse. You're so bad. Qin Yining looked at her shy appearance and thought that Pang Xiao had been saved. Even if their future was full of difficulties, as long as they were alive, she was not afraid of anything. Thinking of this, Qin Yining was in a good mood. He tried hard not to laugh out loud. When they returned to Si Qin Garden, Qin Yining sent Bing Tang and Ji Yun to bathe and change their clothes to rest. He called for Xian Yun and asked in a low voice, "Where's Wang Yi?" Xian Yun looked outside the door. After making sure that no one was eavesdropping, she said in a low voice, "A few people just came. They said they were your good friends." Old Master's bodyguard Chao asked someone to invite Wang Yi out. Qin Yining immediately understood that Pang Xiao went out to meet the people from the Qingtian Alliance. Although the people of the Qingtian Alliance were not upright gentlemen, nor did they have the talent to govern a country, there were many capable people among them. This time, her and Pang Xiao's plan required the help of the capable people in the Qingtian Alliance. Qin Yining knew that Pang Xiao would be very careful when she went out. She wouldn't even walk in front of the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu, so he was completely relieved. These days of hiding would soon be over. He could only persevere for a while longer. Qin Yining had someone send an invitation to the palace. "Tell them that Wang Yi is still in the underground palace, and so is your majesty. I would like to pay my respects to the Empress and Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager and Li Helan were eating grapes. The newly presented grapes were plump and the juice was rich and sweet. Li Helan ate happily, but the Empress Dowager took two to slow down. "We eat well here. But your imperial brother is in the underground palace. My heart is really going to be full of holes." Li Helan slowly put down her hand and threw the grapes into the plate. She slowly took out a handkerchief to wipe her fingers. "Imperial mother, don't be sad. Imperial brother will definitely be safe and sound." When Li Helan said this, she was actually not confident in her own heart. During this period of time, Ji Ziyu had been digging on the mountain. During this time, he had only gone down the mountain once. It was clear that the situation on the mountain was not optimistic. Li Helan didn't know what would happen to Du Zhou if Li Qitian was really gone. But her own brother was sitting in that position, and her cousin was sitting in that position. Naturally, it would not be the same for her. "Imperial mother, why don't we think of a way to arrange more people to save Imperial brother as soon as possible?" The Empress Dowager smiled bitterly and said, "It's easier said than done. It's already been 20 days. 20 days. Your Imperial brother is inside. He's most likely. Imperial mother doesn't dare to think about it. Even if we arrange for people to go now, I'm afraid." Li Helan couldn't help but frown and say, "When the incident happened, why didn't Imperial mother arrange for more people to go?" Li Helan had been pampered since she was young. When she spoke with the Empress Dowager, it was only a mother-daughter conversation. She always said what she thought. She really didn't realize that her words really pierced the Empress Dowager's heart. The Empress Dowager's face couldn't help but sink. "What were you doing at that time?" "At that time, Aijia was busy consolidating our Li family's position in the imperial court. Do you think that if Aijia didn't arrange for Prince Li to be the regent in time and control the Tiger Army's military power in your uncle's hands, those factions in the imperial court would have continued to submit? When your imperial brother was still there, they were still unconvinced. Based on us women, if we don't think of a way to hold on to power, we will die sooner or later." Li Helan was frightened by the Empress Dowager's eyes that seemed to want to eat people. She blinked and swallowed her saliva. Then, she said timidly, "Imperial mother, don't be angry. Daughter also knows your difficulties. Not to mention anything else, these days when I entered the palace, I was interrogated twice. Those damned eunuchs must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to search my body. Fortunately, I still have some dignity. They also didn't dare to be presumptuous. There's such a thing. The Empress Dowager was very surprised. She couldn't help but sit up straight and ask, when did this happen? Why didn't I hear you mention it before? It's just these 2 days. They didn't dare to check daughter's body. Aken also didn't take it seriously. Li Helan saw that the Empress Dowager's complexion wasn't good. She asked hesitantly, Imperial Mother, what's wrong? The Empress Dowager shook her head and pursed her lips into a line. Could it be that Prince Li had a rebellious heart? The Empress Dowager thought back and felt that there was something wrong with Prince Li's appearance. The Empress Dowager knew her daughter's temperament very well. She was very impulsive and arrogant. If she told her these things, it was possible that her daughter would give herself away outside. If the noise reached Prince Li's ears, it would be bad. Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager only said, it's nothing. At this time, an eunuch came to the door and replied, reporting to the Empress Dowager, Prince Zhongshuan's consort has sent an invitation. The Empress Dowager and Li Helan both raised their eyebrows and looked at the door. Li Helan frowned, his face full of displeasure. The eunuch came forward with the invitation in both hands. The Empress Dowager received it and glanced at it, saying, the Qin clan requests an imperial edict to enter the palace later to pay respects to Aijia. She can be considered considerate. She's just being hypocritical. Li Helan raised his voice in dissatisfaction, that vixen isn't someone easy to deal with. She's used to selling camels in the 9 countries. Imperial Mother, you must not fall into her trap. The Empress Dowager knew that Li Helan and Qin Yining had always been at odds. Li Helan's heart might still be thinking about Pang Xiao. She didn't expose him in front of his face and only said, forget it. If you don't like her, just leave the palace early. This was the Empress Dowager's decision to see Qin Yining. Li Helan was dissatisfied and stood up, Imperial Mother only knows how to side with outsiders. You want me to leave? Fine, I'll leave. After saying this, Li Helan angrily left the palace with his people. The Empress Dowager looked at Li Helan's back and sighed helplessly. Her daughter was so arrogant and willful. At this juncture, she could only let her be. Right now, she didn't have the extra energy to teach her. Qin Yining didn't know the situation in the palace. After receiving permission, he immediately changed his clothes and prepared to enter the palace. Chapter 625. Qin Yining smiled and hugged Pang Xiao back. She hugged his neck and whispered in his ear, don't worry. It's not a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. Nothing will happen. Prince Li does not seem to be an impulsive person. He will not do anything that will harm his reputation, so he will not make things difficult for me. Even so, what if there is an accident? Pang Xiao's arms were around Qin Yining and he was unwilling to let go. The reluctance and worry in his heart almost drowned him. Just remember, don't risk your life for this kind of thing. Whether it succeeds or not, I will take care of it. Qin Yining rubbed against the side of his neck and said in a low voice, I know. I will not let myself get hurt. Pang Xiao took a deep breath to calm herself. She rubbed Qin Yining's head and then touched her high abdomen. She felt the movement of the 2 children through the thick autumn clothing. A long time later, she took 2 steps back with her hands behind her back and said with a serious expression, go. The carriage slowly left Si Qin Garden and headed out of the Fu. She saw that Bing Tang and Ji Yun were accompanying her. One of the 2 Yatu was skilled in medicine, the other was not weak in martial arts. She thought that they would be able to protect Qin Yining if something happened, right? The carriage came to the palace gates. Qin Yining found that compared to when she had entered the palace in the past, there was an extra generation of guards. Stepping into the palace gates, without Pang Xiao at her side and without the Empress Dowager's decree, Qin Yining did not have the right to ride a sedan. She could only walk step by step to Ci and palace. Fortunately, Qin Yining's body had been well recuperated. With Bing Tang and Ji Yun supporting her, and the palace attendants leading the way did not make things difficult for her. They always took care of her speed. The journey was not difficult. But before she reached Ci and palace, the middle-ranking official guarding the gates of Ci and palace came forward with people. He smiled and bowed to Qin Yining. Greetings to Wang Fei. I have been waiting here for a long time. Oh. How could I dare to trouble Gong Gong to wait for me? Does the Empress Dowager have something important to instruct me? Qin Yining smiled dignified. He could already see the hostility in the middle-ranking official's eyes. Zhongguan took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, according to Prince Li's order, right now the Taitan are on the border, the war situation in the north is critical. In order to prevent Taitan spies from sneaking into the palace, or to prevent Taitan spies from using distinguished officials to bring dangerous goods into the palace, everyone who enters Ci and palace, no matter who they are, must be searched. Speaking to this point, Zhongguan smiled until his eyes narrowed. He cupped his hands and said, Wang Fei, please understand. I am just following orders. The safety of the Empress Dowager is the most important. Don't you think so? Qin Yining's expression didn't change. He thought to himself that Prince Li had indeed become suspicious. It was within their expectations that they would act so quickly. Ji Yun said with displeasure, Our Wang Fei is Prince Zhongguan's official wife. Prince Zhongguan is your Majesty's adopted brother and the Empress Dowager's adopted son. They are all our own people. Do you still want to search them? Zhongguan glanced at Ji Yun and said with a fake smile, Prince Li's meaning is naturally not that he doesn't trust his relatives, but that he is afraid that someone will use his relatives to hide bad things on everyone. Miss, Wang Fei hasn't said anything yet. Why are you so anxious? His tone was filled with suspicion, as if Ji Yun was the person with intentions he mentioned. Ji Yun gritted her teeth. She felt very indignant. Bing Tang also frowned. If news of them being searched in front of Ci and palace spread, what would they become? Zhongguan crossed his arms and smiled as he waited for Qin Yining's reaction. Qin Yining smiled and said, I didn't expect there to be such a new rule. Now that the imperial court is in troubled times, this is also human nature. Zhongguan smiled and narrowed his eyes. In the end, Wang Fei is knowledgeable. Ji Yun gritted her teeth and snorted. Qin Yining said, however, if you want to search me, it's not up to others to touch me. You can just arrange for an old mama to watch over me. Zhongguan's expression changed. How can this be? How can this not be? Qin Yining said coldly, this king's consort is Prince Zhongguan's legitimate wife. She is a first-rank noble lady personally conferred by your majesty. Could it be that Gong Gong wants the servants to search me? Is this for the Empress Dowager's safety, or is it to deliberately humiliate me? As soon as the words Prince Zhongshan were mentioned, the middle-ranking official trembled. Pang Zhao's power was not as simple as it seemed. If this demon was really angered, the consequences would be unimaginable. Right now, it was unknown whether Prince Zhongguan was dead or alive. It would be fine if he was dead, but what if he was not dead? Prince Zhongguan had previously resisted 33 imperial edicts for this person in front of him. If she blew a pillow wind, would he still be able to keep his head? Zhongguan somewhat compromised. He called 2 mamas over and led Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun to the side room for inspection. Qin Yining was helped by Bing Tang and Ji Yun to undress. The 2 mamas did not dare to come forward and stretch out their hands, but they carefully stared at Qin Yining from the front and back, unwilling to let go of any details. Qin Yining took off his inner clothes and was about to put on his outer robe. One of the mamas said, "Wang Fei's inner clothes have not been inspected yet." Qin Yining sneered. Ji Yun raised her hand and slapped the mamas, causing them to cover their face and freeze on the spot. "Don't be so shameless. Don't you know what kind of person our Wang Fei is? You want to inspect her inner clothes? Are you worthy? Wang Fei is pregnant with the heir of the Wang Fu. If she catches a cold, even if the two of you are chopped into pieces, it won't be enough to compensate." That mama still wanted to retort, but she was pulled back by the other mamas, so she had no choice but to shut up. The other mamas smiled and said, "Wang Fei, please forgive us. We servants are stubborn. Wang Fei is not an evil person, nor is she a spy. We are just going through the motions." Qin Yining smiled. "I've already taken off my inner clothes. You've seen everything inside and outside, yet you say you're just going through the motions. I think you shouldn't go through the motions. Check carefully how you want to. Don't come back and blame me in the future." The two mamas complained in their hearts. This Wang Fei was too difficult to get along with. No matter what they did or said, it was wrong. They were afraid that Qin Yining would hold a grudge against them, so the two of them smiled and roughly checked Bing Tang and Ji Yun. After confirming that they didn't carry any dangerous items, they went out to report. Qin Yining tidied up and left the side room. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, the middle-ranking official let them go. Qin Yining and the two maidservants entered CI and palace with great difficulty. They were only allowed to enter the main hall after passing through the palace servants. The Empress Dowager sat at the head of the table and looked at Qin Yining with a slightly tense expression. Qin Yining had a big belly, so her bowing movements were extremely clumsy. The Empress Dowager saw that it was inconvenient for her, so she said, "No need for formalities. We're all on the same side, so there's no need to be so polite. Thank you for your understanding, Empress Dowager." Qin Yining stood up and smiled gratefully. Her bright eyes swept over and found that the Empress Dowager's expression was not right. It seemed like she was especially nervous. The Empress Dowager said, "Qin clan, why did you come to the palace to see Aijia?" Qin Yining narrowed her eyes and looked around. When the Empress Dowager saw this, she immediately understood and waved her hand. The palace servants on her left and right filed out. Bing Tang and Ji Yun remained by Qin Yining's side. Chapter 626. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager's pupils shrank. She frowned and said, "What inconvenience can there be in my palace? All the servants have gone out." Qin Yining stared at the Empress Dowager for a moment and suddenly smiled, as if he was relieved. He said in a low voice, "Then I'm relieved. I came to the palace today because I have a secret to tell the Empress Dowager and ask for your help." The Empress Dowager said, "If you have something to say, just say it. We're not outsiders." Qin Yining said, "Please wait a moment, Empress Dowager." As he spoke, he raised his hand to untie his lapel. The Empress Dowager was very surprised. She sat at the head of the table and stared blankly as Qin Yining undid his clothes. Finally, he untied his white undergarment. He turned sideways and took out a silk handkerchief from his pocket. He slowly walked forward and presented it to the Empress Dowager with both hands. The Empress Dowager narrowed her eyes and suspiciously took the handkerchief, which was still warm from Qin Yining's body temperature. Black ink stains could be seen on the white silk handkerchief. There were obviously words on it. The Empress Dowager unfolded the handkerchief and took a look. Her eyes suddenly widened. This is... On the handkerchief was a letter written by Li Qitian. Although there was no seal, the Empress Dowager could still recognize Li Qitian's handwriting. Li Qitian had specially prepared this for Qin Yining to keep with him in order to convince the Empress Dowager to believe in Qin Yining. Is this true? This is really a letter written by my son. Where is my son now? The Empress Dowager was so excited that her hands were trembling. She didn't refer to herself as Empress Dowager or Emperor Li Qitian. As a mother, she still cared about her child. Qin Yining sighed softly and said, Empress Dowager, your Majesty is now in the Wang Mansion. When did you save them? Why didn't they send me any news? Empress Dowager, Marquis Dingbei has been guarding the mountain these days. Finally, the heavens didn't let him down. Last night, Your Majesty and Wang Yi were rescued. Your Majesty has suffered a lot in the underground palace. She has lost some weight due to hunger, but her body is fine. When the Empress Dowager heard that Li Qitian was only thin due to hunger and nothing else serious, her eyes filled with tears of joy. She put her palms together and bowed to the void several times. Amitabha. Bodhisattva, bless. Bodhisattva. Thinking about what Qin Yining had said, he felt that something was wrong. Since he's fine now, why didn't he hurry back to the palace? The court still needs him. Empress Dowager, Your Majesty did intend to return to the palace at first. However, before we could descend the mountain, we encountered people from the warden's office of the 5 cities searching the mountain. It was said that a Taitan spy had infiltrated. Your Majesty thought it was strange at that time. He didn't trust the people of the warden's office, so we used a little trick and successfully escaped from the mountain. Before the Empress Dowager became the Empress Dowager, she was just an ordinary woman. Even though she was smarter than the average woman, because of Li Qitian's many years of military campaigns, she could be considered experienced and knowledgeable. She was also calmer than the average woman. However, when she heard Qin Yining's simple description, the Empress Dowager's face paled in fright. What happened after we escaped? Where is my son now? Don't worry, Empress Dowager. Your Majesty is temporarily hiding in the prince's estate. Your Majesty ordered this woman to enter the palace and report to the Empress Dowager, asking the Empress Dowager to order the Marquis of Qingyang to lead the Tiger Army to escort him back to the palace. When Qin Yining said this, he carefully observed the Empress Dowager's expression. When the Empress Dowager heard about the Marquis of Qingyang and the Tiger Army, her eyes turned. Her expression also showed some panic. Her hands tightened on her sleeves, as if she was conflicted and afraid of something. Qin Yining said, Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager, please issue an edict. Your Majesty now only trusts the Tiger Army. Aijia understands. In a moment, I will order the Marquis of Qingyang to handle it. The Empress Dowager said anxiously. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and slowly nodded, that's good. This way, Your Majesty can also be at ease. This woman will immediately return to report. Your Majesty will be able to return to the palace very soon. When he said this, Qin Yining deliberately observed the Empress Dowager's expression again. This time, the Empress Dowager seemed to feel something and met Qin Yining's eyes. Qin Yining took the opportunity to blink inquiringly. The Empress Dowager sat stiffly in her original position. Her voice was calm and dignified as she said, You did very well this time. When Your Majesty returns to the palace, Aijia will certainly heavily reward your prince's estate. Your Majesty was able to be safe in the underground palace because of Jishi's loyal protection. When Aijia returns, Aijia will hold a banquet and invite the officials and their families into the palace. It will be good for everyone to enjoy together. Many thanks for the Empress Dowager's grace. Qin Yining lowered his eyes and respectfully bowed. Then he said, The news has been delivered. This woman still has to return to the prince's estate to report. I will take my leave. The Empress Dowager's hand tightened. In the end, she didn't say anything and only nodded, Go. If you have free time, come and accompany Aijia. Aijia likes you when Aijia sees you. It was clearly a casual courtesy. Qin Yining only smiled when he heard it. After bowing, he left the main hall of Ci and Palace with Bing Tang and Ji Yun. The Empress Dowager watched as Qin Yining slowly left with the support of the two women. Her mouth opened, but in the end, she didn't say anything because of fear. The palace doors were closed with a creak. The Empress Dowager sat upright in her original position. She heard a series of footsteps coming from behind the screen behind her, approaching from afar. Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang leisurely strolled out, one on the left and one on the right. They stood not far from the Empress Dowager and chatted in low voices without hiding anything. This king felt something was wrong last night. That group of idiots still haven't found out what was wrong with them. They actually allowed that stinking woman to put on an act and take them away. They really were one step too late. That's right. Marquis Qingyang also said, Wang Yi, what do we do now? What do we do? Just wait. Prince Li stood with his hands behind his back. He squinted his eyes and smiled at the deathly pale Empress Dowager. He asked in a refined manner, Empress Dowager, what do you think? The Empress Dowager's face instantly turned deathly pale. Her entire body trembled violently and her lips trembled uncontrollably. Prince Li saw the Empress Dowager like this and laughed. The Empress Dowager is normally so awe-inspiring. Today, you've become so terrified. This king is truly surprised. Just now, we were behind the screen wondering when the Empress Dowager was planning on telling that little girl that we were behind the screen. Even if she didn't tell him, she should at least give him a reminder. Later, unexpectedly, the Empress Dowager didn't say anything. This really is, haha. As Prince Li spoke, he rocked back and forth with laughter. Marquis Qingyang also shook his head. It seems that in the Empress Dowager's eyes, as long as you're given enough glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, it doesn't matter who becomes the emperor. Aijia didn't. The Empress Dowager trembled like a sieve. You can't be like this. Your Majesty has treated you well. Your Majesty has always given you a lot in the past. Prince Li, you're your Majesty's younger cousin. And Daong, you're your Majesty's uncle, Aijia's younger brother. How can you be like this? Chapter 627. The Empress Dowager's complexion turned ashen from Prince Li's words. She trembled in fear and almost couldn't sit still. She was limp and completely relied on the support of the pillow to prevent herself from falling. She was indeed afraid of death. When Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang entered the palace today, it was as if they had suddenly become different people. They were no longer as respectful to her as before. Prince Li's actions caused the Empress Dowager to be angry, but she wasn't that sad. She could only blame herself for not recognizing people clearly and mistaking a thief with ulterior motives for a good person. However, Marquis Qingyang was her younger brother. At this critical juncture, even her younger brother wasn't willing to help. The Empress Dowager truly couldn't take it anymore. Tears streamed down her face. The Empress Dowager clutched her chest and sobbed in extreme grief. She felt wronged like a child who couldn't find her way home. How can you hit a person who's down like this? How can you treat Aijia like this? How can you treat the emperor like this? He treated you well. You're all relatives, yet you're not willing to help. Not only do you not want to help, you actually want to kill him. What good will it do you if he dies? How can you face your ancestors by doing this? Hearing the Empress Dowager's heart-wrenching sobs, Prince Li couldn't help but laugh. It seems that your Majesty has protected you too well. He actually made you think this way. Commander Prince Li took a few steps forward and leaned closer to her. His eyes were gentle as he said, what made you misunderstand that as long as they are relatives, you can order them around and order them to come and go as you wish? You put me in this position and said that you wanted me to be a regent. You only fancied my gentle temperament and easy to manipulate. If you could order me around at will, I wouldn't say a single word of no, right? But I'm forced to stand in this position. How many of my subordinates call me Prince Regent? Once your Majesty returns, with his temperament, could he easily let me go? Your Majesty wouldn't even let go of Pang Zhishi, who has made great contributions on the battlefield. That's someone who can't possibly shake his throne. As someone who's been discussed as Prince Regent, what good end could I possibly have? Therefore, everything I'm doing right now is actually the same as you. It's all for the sake of self-preservation. You think too much. Your Majesty is not that kind of person. I won't hurt you. The Empress Dowager's face was full of tears. She anxiously tugged at Prince Li's sleeve, appeasing and begging, Your Majesty is not that kind of person. He and Pang Zhishi are not biological brothers, but you are different. You are his biological cousin. How is it different? In order to stabilize his position, he would even capture and kill anyone, let alone his own cousin. Prince Li's smile became even more gentle, like a demon luring people into depravity. His voice was full of a soothing tone. Don't worry, Empress Dowager. Whatever I do, it's only against your Majesty and to save my own life. It has nothing to do with you, a woman in the palace. You only need to worry about passing your days peacefully in this palace. This king and the Marquis of Qingyang will respect you and be filial to you as before. Your life will not change in the slightest. Isn't that good? The Empress Dowager looked at Prince Li's face. At this time, she already realized that perhaps anything she said would be useless. In the end, he was not flesh that fell from her body and was not related to her by blood. Not only could she not count on him, it was already good enough that Prince Li did not directly take his life. The Empress Dowager then looked towards the Marquis of Qingyang. Daong, what about you? Do you also want to treat me like this? I am your biological sister. I've always treated you well and did my best for our Zhou family. Do you also want to be like this and not let your nephew off? The Marquis of Qingyang helplessly spread out his hands and said with a mischievous smile, Of course what sister says is reasonable, but for better or for worse, you should think for me. You know best what kind of personality your own son has. If you allow him to return and continue sitting in this position, not to mention anything else, he will first accuse me of stealing military power from the Tiger Army. At that time, where will I go to reason? He won't. When the Empress Dowager heard that this was what the Marquis of Qingyang was afraid of, she hastily rushed forward and grabbed his hand. He won't harm you. You are his biological uncle. I can guarantee that he definitely won't disobey my wishes. I will protect you. That's enough, sister. Don't deceive yourself and others. The Marquis of Qingyang supported the Empress Dowager back to her seat and looked down at her from above. Just like Prince Li said, he can't even tolerate Pang Zhishi, who fought alongside him, let alone me. I will tell the Emperor that it was I who gave you military power from the Tiger Army. I don't blame you. The Empress Dowager anxiously raised her head. Her entire face was red and the veins on her forehead were bulging. The Marquis of Qingyang said, Can he believe it? Even if he believes it, it's not like he can't casually accuse me of a crime. When the time comes, he will pull my head off with a glare. What should I do? When the time comes, will sister die with me or die in my place? The Empress Dowager slumped back in her seat. The two people in front of her had already made up their minds. She felt that it was useless to say anything. She was a useless mother. She didn't have the ability and couldn't rush out to save her son. Right now, she could only place her hopes on Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. Since they were able to secretly send someone to the prince's estate without the knowledge of the warden's office, they should also do their best to protect your majesty's life, right? As the Empress Dowager thought this, she suddenly thought of herself. Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang clearly already had disloyal intentions and wanted to usurp power. She knew such a big secret. Wouldn't she be silenced in the blink of an eye? The Empress Dowager's eyes widened in fright. Her entire body trembled violently again. She wanted to escape in fright, but the two people in front of her wouldn't let her escape. She was so scared that her face turned pale and her body trembled like a leaf about to fall from a tree branch in a gale. Seeing the Empress Dowager's expression suddenly change, the Marquis of Qingyang already understood what she was thinking. He helplessly said, "Sister, you don't need to be too scared. No matter what, we are still a family. As long as you are obedient and don't speak carelessly, your younger brother isn't a tiger or a wolf. How could I not care about your life? Besides, even if Prince Li ascends the throne in the future, Prince Li's birth mother is no longer here. You can still continue to be the Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager's body trembled even more violently. Tears continuously flowed out as she looked at Prince Li in fright. Prince Li smiled and patted the Empress Dowager's shoulder, saying, "The Empress Dowager really doesn't need to be afraid. This king isn't a man-eating demon. In the future, when he ascends the throne, this king will also be filial to you." Although he said this, Prince Li's attitude was too frivolous. The Empress Dowager was so shocked that she didn't know what to do. Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang each pulled out a chair and sat across from the Empress Dowager. They chatted intimately with her. Although the two chatted cheerfully and often laughed, the Empress Dowager sat in her original position and cried in fright. The more the two laughed, the fiercer her tears fell. Chapter 628. What a good Prince Zhongshuan consort, you actually dared to enter the palace. Li Helan stopped and arrogantly raised her chin as she looked at Qin Yining with disdain. Aside from eating and eating, she had been waiting to block her the entire time. Knowing that Qin Yining wanted to enter the palace to see the Empress Dowager and Empress, Li Helan didn't dare cause trouble in the Empress Dowager's palace. She wanted to wait on the path outside the Empress Dowager's palace. At that time, even if she kicked this slut a few times, no one would care. Who knew that after waiting for a long time at the Empress Dowager's palace, she still didn't see her? There was even a small eunuch that came to pass a message saying, "Prince Zhongshuan consort isn't feeling well and is in a hurry to leave the palace." Not feeling well. Why would she enter the palace if she wasn't feeling well? They weren't the ones who invited her. She sent an invitation to enter the palace, but after seeing the Empress Dowager and not seeing her imperial sister-in-law, she wanted to leave. What kind of rule was this? Could it be that she was just a small official's wife, so how could she look down on the mother of the country? Wasn't she just marrying Pang Zhishi? What was there to be proud of? Li Helan's disgust towards Qin Yining increased by another level. She immediately called her servants and rushed over to block Qin Yining. Qin Yining narrowed her eyes as she looked at Li Helan. She suppressed the anxiety and irritation in her heart and bowed, "Greetings to your highness the eldest princess." This official's wife doesn't understand what the eldest princess means. What do you mean you don't understand? Tell me, why didn't you kneel down to greet this princess? Could it be that you're looking at my imperial brother's life and death and are hoping for the country to change? Li Helan was clearly making things difficult for her, causing Bing Tang and Ji Yun's expressions to instantly change. Qin Yining had been pregnant with the twins for 8 months and her belly was already comparable to a normal pregnant woman about to give birth. Even though she had been treated well by Bing Tang, she still couldn't stand kneeling down. The eldest princess was also a woman. How could she make things difficult for a pregnant woman? Qin Yining sighed in her heart. Li Helan was so unruly. She thought that she would restrain herself after getting married, but she didn't expect her to become even worse. Qin Yining. Thinking about Li Helan's actions and Ji Ziyu, Qin Yining felt that Ji Ziyu wasn't worth it. Qin to feel for Ji Ziyu. On top of that, Li Helan's evil intentions towards Pang Xiao were obvious to anyone with a discerning eye. Therefore, her disgust towards Li Helan increased tenfold. Qin Yining couldn't help showing her emotions on her face. She sneered and said, "Princess Royal, you must be joking. The Empress Dowager is kind and considerate of my inconvenience, so I don't have to salute in the palace. Does to princesses princess. Is to princess of you. When did this one say that? Imperial mother is benevolent, but you shouldn't be so shameless." Li Helan had her hands on her hips and pointed at Qin Yining. She looked like she was going to fight with Qin Yining today. She had long disliked Qin Yining. To be able to seduce a heroic figure like Pang Xiao to only fall in love with her, she really had great skills. She had such an outstanding man and she didn't know how to cherish her fortune. She even dared to come out and show off. She even dared to go to the Taten and come back with a big belly. Looking at her belly, it should be something that only a woman about to give birth would have, right? Who would believe that they were twins? It was possible that Pang Xiao had said this to cover up her embarrassment. She would just casually bring a child to her side and say that Qin Yining gave birth to two. It wasn't impossible for someone like Pang Xiao to do it. The more Li Helan thought about it, the more she felt it was possible. She only treated Qin Yining as a disaster that would bring disaster to the country. Not only did he kill the female Khan of the Taten and lead the war in, he even had Pang Xiao, the god of war, Wang Yi, completely under his control. Li Helan did not hide the emotions in her heart. Her eyes were filled with hatred as if she wanted to skin Qin Yining alive. When Ji Yun saw this, she moved closer to Qin Yining. If Li Helan dared to order the people around her to move, she would not be polite to them. She had long disliked Li Helan. With Wang Yi supporting her, she was not afraid of anything. "Eldest princess," Qin Yining said in a deep voice, "please pay attention to your words and actions. You are your Majesty's younger sister and the Empress Dowager's daughter. If you act so recklessly, aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others? It doesn't matter if you are laughed at, but if you affect your Majesty's and the Empress Dowager's reputation, wouldn't that be bad? I advise the eldest princess to read more and write more when she's free. People say that people learn from books and that writing can temper one's state of mind. You can give it a try." Li Helan almost rolled her eyes in anger. "You actually dare to laugh at this princess for being uncultured. Only you have talent, only you read more books. No one else can compare to you. Who do you think you are? If you really have the ability, you can go to the north and sleep with the Taten people and tell them not to attack the city. That is your ability. Why are you pretending to be a scholarly, noble, chaste, and virtuous woman? After what you did in the Taten, do you think we are all blind fools?" Li Helan grew up in the countryside and had seen many of these village women bicker. When she was angry and anxious, she couldn't control her emotions and couldn't help but speak without thinking. Bing Tang angrily glared and opened her mouth to refute, but Qin Yining pulled her back in time. The difference in status was too great. If Bing Tang opened her mouth, she would be waiting for Li Helan to bully her. Qin Yining said, "Eldest princess really has a good upbringing. In this imperial palace, you can say anything dirty and smelly. Could it be that no one teaches the eldest princess what manners are? Some things are just rumors. Even the shrews on the streets who are good at cursing people don't believe them, but the eldest princess talks about it." "Really?" Shaking her head, as if she couldn't find a word to describe the eldest princess's vulgarity, Qin Yining said, "This subject can't think of anything in common with the eldest princess, so I will take my leave." "Eldest princess, please go ahead." She curtsied. Qin Yining then took the two maidservants and walked outside. She still had to go back and discuss with Pang Xiao, so she didn't have the mood or time to argue with Li Helan. Qin Yining's words were filled with disdain and her expression was filled with disdain. Li Helan had always been jealous of Qin Yining. Seeing that she was about to give birth and still looked so beautiful, the jealousy in her heart surged. Thinking of how Ji Ziyu had personally sent her back to the palace yesterday and even changed her clothes in the palace, she felt even angrier when she wanted to see Ji Ziyu. "You're just a little hussy who specializes in seducing people." The eldest princess chased after Qin Yining. "First you seduced brother Xiao and now you seduce this one's husband. You're shameless." Qin Yining was stunned by her unreasonable actions. This was the imperial palace and Li Helan dared to act like this. Was she not afraid of breaking the rules? Ji Yun quickly moved in front of Qin Yining and blocked Li Helan's hand. Ji Yun was angry, but she knew her limits. She knew that the princess was precious and if she was hurt, it would bring disaster to her master. No matter how angry she was, she did not make a move against Li Helan. She just lowered her head and stood there, using her body to block the two personalities. Li Helan was already filled with anger from not being able to pull Qin Yining. Seeing this blind servant standing in front of her like a block of wood, she couldn't take it anymore. She gritted her teeth and wanted to go around them. But if she went to the left, Ji Yun would go to the left. If she went to the right, Ji Yun would go to the right. She was completely blocked. Li Helan angrily raised her hand to slap her. Ji Yun received this slap, but she did not move at all. Qin Yining saw that Ji Yun was hit and became even more angry. At this critical moment, she was anxious to go back and discuss countermeasures with Pang Xiao, but Li Helan was causing trouble out of nothing. "Your Highness the eldest princess, have you caused enough trouble?" Qin Yining pulled Ji Yun behind her. She placed her bulging stomach in the middle and forced Li Helan back several steps. Li Helan stood still and realized that she had shown weakness by backing up in front of Qin Yining. Her face turned green and she pointed at Qin Yining's nose. "You. Shut up." Qin Yining coldly said, "The eldest princess is a noble descendant. In such troubled times, your majesty's situation is still unknown, but you are in a hurry to bully an outsider. Aren't you afraid that it will spread and make the court officials bitterly disappointed? You act so disorderly, you are really discrediting the Empress Dowager. You, impudent." Li Helan's expression changed greatly. "You dare to insult the Empress Dowager. When has this subject insulted the Empress Dowager? This subject is wronged on behalf of the Empress Dowager. The eldest princess is unfilial and implicates the Empress Dowager. She has wronged the Empress Dowager for no reason. Even the servants can't stand it. You should know your place. If you cause a ruckus, look at the current situation in the court and see if it is good for the imperial family." A woman's virtue was taught by her mother. Li Helan did not follow the rules and was completely connived by the Empress Dowager. Li Helan had already caused people to talk behind her back because she kept a gigolo. Now, she was being reprimanded by Qin Yining. Not to mention others, she already felt that she had lost face. Seeing Li Helan's face turn red and she looked like she was about to cry, Qin Yining put up a finger and said, "The eldest princess shouldn't cause a ruckus, lest you lose face." After saying this, he called Ji Yun and Bing Tang and turned to leave. Li Helan looked as if she had been wronged. She stood in the same place and cried. She chased after Qin Yining and scolded in a choked voice, "You bitch, seducing brother Xiao and then seducing the prince consort. You are so restless, you deserve to be a widow." Qin Yining was so angry that he stopped in his tracks. He turned around and glared at her. His cold eyes were as frightening as a beast whose cubs had been stolen. Although Pang Xiao had safely come out of the underground palace, the road ahead would be difficult. There would often be battles on the battlefield, and the days of fear would be long. Qin Yining hated this the most. Li Helan's words really touched her bottom line. Wang Yi and your majesty are trapped in the underground palace. If you curse me to be a widow, aren't you cursing your majesty? Li Helan was immediately speechless. She was afraid that Qin Yining would pass these words to the Empress Dowager's ears, so she cried out in grievance. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun moved forward again. The palace servants who had been standing on both sides of the palace road with their heads down and pretending to be quails couldn't help but look at Qin Yining with admiration. She was indeed the Prince Zhongshuan's woman. She could make the domineering eldest princess obedient and only knew how to stand there and cry. She was simply valiant. Chapter 629. When the Empress heard the news, she was holding her waist and sitting on the soft chair in a daze with a frown. Is that so? Is she really capable of doing something so stupid? Your Majesty, many people saw it with their own eyes. It was on the long street outside the palace. Princess Royal walked out of your place and went directly to Prince Zhongshuan's consort. The palace servant who served the Empress all year round knew the Empress's thoughts best. She observed the Empress's expression and said flatteringly, Princess Royal is really too much. How can she quarrel with an outsider's wife on the long street? It is said that Princess Royal even wanted to use force on Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Princess Royal is 8 months pregnant. It is said that she didn't come to see your Majesty because she didn't feel well after seeing the Empress Dowager. Princess Royal actually dared to touch Princess Royal. It is really. The palace servant shook his head. As a palace servant, it was not good to talk too much. However, the Empress had been angered by the eldest princess many times over the years. Seeing the eldest princess lose face now, these loyal subordinates felt their hatred had been vented. Hearing this, the Empress's dull face turned into a mocking one. She became lively. There should be someone who can teach her a lesson. The imperial court is in such a mess now. It is not the turn of the harem to make trouble. The Qin clan is pregnant. Not to mention her, even the Empress Dowager, and I don't dare to let anything happen to her. She dared to provoke the Qin clan. She really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The Empress was dissatisfied and resentful. Her sister-in-law had never been easy to deal with. It was fine if she was spoiled and willful. It could be understood as the innocence of a girl. But she had a male companion after getting married. She could do such a thing that damaged women's virtue and disgraced the imperial family. The Empress Dowager didn't even care about it. Instead, she supported Li Helan. Your Majesty had such a big thing this time. The Empress Dowager came up to fight for power. First, she made a regent. Then, she snatched the position of the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army from her son-in-law and gave it to her younger brother. The Empress was weak and her mother's family was not strong. They could only watch helplessly as the Empress Dowager scurried up and down. She was now 5 months pregnant and worried about your Majesty. However, she was a woman in the palace and had no power in her hands. She had no other choice but to sit in the palace and count the days. Now that there was a Li Helan who could give the Empress Dowager some trouble, the Empress felt that her body and mind were much better. Letting out a long breath, the Empress stood up from the soft couch. She held her waist and slowly walked to the caltrop window. She reached out and pushed the window sash open a crack. The cold wind of late autumn blew against his face, and a trace of coldness drilled into his collar, causing goosebumps to rise on his neck. However, when he took a deep breath, he felt refreshed. Nyang Nyang, be careful. You'll get a headache from the cold wind. The servant took a cloud shawl and draped it over the Empress' shoulders. The Empress shook her head and looked at the setting sun that was gradually disappearing behind the mountains. Her eyes were actually a little wet. Your Majesty, are you all right? If you were still in the palace, how could you let these rascals jump up and down and disturb the palace? These people only cared about the small benefits in front of them and did not care about the safety of the country. The north had the Taden, the south had the Yen. They did not care at all. Including the Empress Dowager, they were like poor relatives from the countryside, anxiously staring at the benefits in front of them. If your Majesty did not come back, she really did not know how long she could hold on. If someone really did usurp power, she was afraid that the first to suffer would be her and the child in her womb. At that time, the Empress Dowager would probably completely ignore her and only care about the benefits in front of her. The Empress thought of this and could not help but cry. Thinking of this, she would rather not be the Empress. It was better to be a woman of a normal family and have a stable life. When Qin Yining returned to the Wang Fu, he saw that Huzi, who had been on the mountain, had returned. He personally received Qin Yining's carriage and went straight to the inner residence. He removed the threshold of Si Qin Garden and drove the carriage in. Qin Yining got out of the carriage and asked, "How is the situation on the mountain?" Huzi said, "Wang Fei, don't worry. The excavation on the mountain is still continuing. Wang Yi has already made arrangements. The people who should withdraw have already withdrawn." Qin Yining smiled and nodded, saying, "That's good. Where is Wang Yi now?" "Wang Yi went to send your Majesty and Marquis Dingbei off." Just as Huzi's voice fell, a slight sound came from the top of the wall on the right. Then there was the sound of light footsteps like a leopard cat landing on the ground. Pang Xiao, who was dressed in dark blue, ordinary home clothes, quickly walked over. "You're back. How is your body? Are you feeling unwell?" "I'm very good. It's just that Ji Yun was wronged because she followed me and was slapped by Anyang Princess Royal." Qin Yining held Ji Yun's hand and said, "When we left the palace, we met Anyang Princess Royal. I don't know what went wrong with her, but she pointed at me and scolded me. Later on, she even tried to push me. Ji Yun tried to stop her, but she didn't dare to directly make a move against Princess Royal. Instead, she was slapped by Princess Royal." Pang Xiao looked at Ji Yun's left cheek. It was already red. He couldn't help but sigh, "Good girl, it's all thanks to you. You've wronged yourself this time." Ji Yun was personally groomed by Pang Xiao. She had always been in awe of Pang Xiao. After following Qin Yining, although they suffered a lot together, Qin Yining treated her very well. She also sincerely treated Qin Yining as a master that she could entrust her life to. She didn't feel anything when she was slapped because of Qin Yining. But Qin Yining took this matter to heart. Pang Xiao even gently comforted her. It really warmed her heart. Ji Yun repeatedly shook her head, "This is this servant's duty." Qin Yining said, "Let Bing Tang help you apply medicine first." The two servant girls knew that Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had something to talk about, so they retreated. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao returned to the room. After sitting down on the warm couch by the window, Qin Yining leaned against the pillow behind him and said, "I went to Ci and Palace and found something. I feel that the Empress Dowager seems to have been put under house arrest." Pang Xiao raised an eyebrow and said with a nod, "This is also expected. Since Prince Li wants the throne, as long as he isn't too stupid, he should go back and monitor the Empress Dowager and Empress." Qin Yining said, "Where is your Majesty right now?" "Thanks to those amazing people from the Qingtian Alliance, they led our people to dig a tunnel at the fastest speed. Your Majesty and the people in our Fu are gradually moving out." "That's good." Qin Yining sighed in relief and said, "You don't know, but I once experienced a calamity in my fu. Because of this, I lost my family and friends. That kind of scene, just once is enough to become a nightmare that I can't forget for the rest of my life. I really don't want to experience it again. Pang Xiao moved closer, hugged Qin Yining, and gave her a peck on the cheek. He couldn't help but rub his face against hers when he felt her soft and cool touch. Don't worry. With me here, I definitely won't let that kind of thing happen to the family. Pang Xiao had been trapped for 20 days and had lost a lot of weight. If he didn't have a good body, practiced martial arts, and had Bing Tang medicine, he probably would have been lying down by now. But when their faces were close, Qin Yining could still feel his sunken cheeks. Qin Yining said with heartache, "I will always be with you." The room was silent. The warm golden rays of the setting sun shone in through the screen window, covering all the furniture in the room with a layer of golden curtains. It was so quiet and warm. In his arms was the woman he wanted to protect and cherish the most in his life. He really wanted time to stop at this moment. But knowing that a storm was coming, how could he relax and enjoy this peace? Since it is as we guessed, Prince Li's people have already taken control of the Empress Dowager, then the best time for them to act is tonight. Chapter 630. Qin Yining relaxed and closed her eyes. She peacefully leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder and thought about the future. Although she was hesitant and worried, because she was with Pang Xiao, she could completely relax. Qin Yining was never someone who was afraid of death. Compared to death, she was more afraid of her family and loved ones being separated by life and death. As long as Pang Xiao was by her side, at least she did not have to worry about him. Compared to this, nothing else was important. Qin Yining was exhausted from the entire day. When she returned to Pang Xiao's side, she was like a tired swallow returning to its nest. After relaxing, she felt a bit drowsy. However, she did not forget to tell Pang Xiao about the suspicious point she had just discovered. There is one more thing. Pang Xiao's voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with gentleness and patience. Qin Yining blinked and forcefully said, "Outside our palace, there must be many spies. When the eldest princess quarreled with me earlier, she said that I seduced North Marquis Dingbei." Pang Xiao frowned when he heard this. He sneered and said, "Don't mind her. I'm afraid that she is about to go crazy. She doesn't know how to behave herself and randomly bites anyone she sees. I trust your character and I understand Jilan even better. You are not that kind of person." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I know that you trust me. On the way back, I kept thinking that there is no smoke without fire. Since the eldest princess said this, there must be a reason. There must be something that caused her to misunderstand. In the past 20 days, I have indeed spent half of my time on the mountain, watching North Marquis Dingbei and the others dig and rescue. At that time, I did not see the eldest princess angrily charge up the mountain to reason with me. With the eldest princess' personality, if she misunderstood, she could even cause trouble for me in the palace. It is not impossible for her to come up the mountain." Pang Xiao nodded, "You are right. So I was thinking that when we came back last night, we were seen by the eldest princess spies." "Oh." Pang Xiao thought about it and vaguely understood, "You are saying that Jilan was outside driving the carriage and sent you back." "Yes, North Marquis Dingbei even bathed and had dinner before leaving." Pang Xiao completely understood. Li Helan spies must have seen this. Such a small matter could make Li Helan stir up such a huge commotion. It really made people speechless. Think about it, if the eldest princess spies saw this, would it be possible that Prince Li's spies saw this as well? Is that why the Empress is being controlled? Pang Yinings's and Is's, Pang Xiao nodded. S's. I of those peoples, eyes, s. Yi Pang Yi, s. Wang Yi. Pang Xiao gently patted Qin Yining's shoulder and got up to answer the door. Huzi said in a low voice, this group of spies has also been completely dealt with. The total number of spies should be enough. Okay, I understand. Tell Mr. Liao to inform the brothers of the Qingtian alliance to prepare. Yes. Huzi bowed and retreated. Qin Yining vaguely understood what they meant by the number of spies. When the time came, if Prince Li attacked with fire, there had to be a way to deceive them. The number of spies had to be enough. If these spies were not arranged by Prince Li, then they were arranged by Marquis Qingyang. Among them were the eldest princess's people, but there was no lack of others. The prince's estate was under the surveillance of these flies every day. If they were not careful, it was very likely that even the color of their underwear would be seen by them. The most important thing was that these spies could become assassins at any time, taking their lives while they were unprepared. Therefore, although Qin Yining felt uncomfortable about killing people, he would not stop Pang Xiao from doing what needed to be done. The result of soft-heartedness was very likely to harm one's own people. Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang stayed together in the Empress Dowager's palace for dinner. Li Helan accompanied them on the side, attentively pouring wine and dishes for the Empress Dowager, Prince Li, and Marquis Qingyang. Imperial Mother, don't be sad. Imperial Brother will be safe and sound. Isn't Prince Consort continuing to dig? Besides, Prince Li has handled the matters of the imperial court in an orderly manner. Although the war in the north is tense, Marquis Qingyang will soon be able to set out to reinforce Tianmen Pass. Although the current situation is tense, it's not that serious. There's still hope. Imperial Mother, why should you cry over this? You should be strong. We still need to rely on you. Li Helan and Qin Yining had a big quarrel and returned to Ci and Palace to complain to the Empress Dowager. Who would have thought that while Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang were both present, the Empress Dowager was sitting at the head of the table, trembling and crying. Li Helan concluded that Qin Yining must have carelessly said something sad to the Empress Dowager, causing her to be sad. In front of Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang, Li Helan exaggerated Qin Yining's domineering, arrogant, and unruly behavior. This time, the Empress Dowager did not scold her. She only said that if she did not like her in the future, then they would not interact. Her tone sounded a bit absent-minded. It was clear that she was greatly angered by Qin Yining. Fortunately, Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang both knew how to be filial to the Empress Dowager. They especially stayed for dinner and could accompany the Empress Dowager to relieve her boredom. Otherwise, who knows how long the Empress Dowager would be sad and depressed. Of the 4 people present, only Li Helan didn't know anything. He only thought that they were relatives of the same family and that they were all on the same side. There was nothing to avoid. The Empress Dowager's heart was about to collapse. She didn't know how many times she gave Li Helan signals, but it was like giving signals to a blind person. Li Helan actually didn't understand at all. One time, he even directly asked her, Imperial Mother, are your eyes hurting from crying? She raised such a stupid, arrogant, and willful daughter who could not be counted on at a critical moment. If it weren't for Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang watching coldly from the side, the Empress Dowager really wanted to violently scold Li Helan to vent her anger. Prince Li was currently in an extremely good mood. He was like an astute old cat who managed to catch a mouse but didn't immediately bite it to death. Instead, he lazily lay on the ground and used his hidden claws to press down on the mouse's tail. He watched as the mouse tried to escape but couldn't, but still held on to hope and struggled. On what basis could Li Qitian conquer the world and become the emperor? The world was about to be his. In the days to come, he would be the emperor. The great Zhou dynasty would be his, and everyone would have to listen to him. He would have supreme power, and he would be able to kill and seize at will. Prince Li thought like this. Seeing Li Helan's stupid fawning appearance was even more interesting. Marquis Qingyang also felt that his niece was very stupid. He simply lowered his head and ate his wine and food. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. After the meal, Prince Li stood up and cupped his hands. Empress Dowager, there are still court matters to take care of outside. I will take my leave first. Seeing this, Marquis Qingyang also stood up and bowed. Many thanks for the Empress Dowager's banquet. Younger brother will also take his leave. The Empress Dowager's heart beat wildly and her frightened eyes widened. They were going to leave. Were they planning to kill the emperor? So what they would do next, would they immediately kill her to silence her? Would Lan her also be? Many ways of dying flashed through the Empress Dowager's mind. Not a single one of them wasn't miserable. Li Helan saw that the Empress Dowager's face had lost all color, as if she had encountered a frightening event that caused the sky to collapse. He couldn't help but ask in confusion, Imperial Mother, what's wrong? Marquis Qingyang smiled and said, Lan uncle is leaving the palace. Won't you send uncle off? Li Helan smiled and said, that's fine. Turning around, Li Helan bowed towards the Empress Dowager, Imperial Mother, daughter will return in a moment. Don't. The Empress Dowager reached out, wanting to grab Li Helan. Right now, she didn't trust Prince Li, and she didn't trust her own younger brother even more. She was already about to helplessly watch these people gang up to kill her son, but she was helpless. If she also lost her daughter's life, how would she live the rest of her life? But when he reached out his hand and saw Commander Prince Li's smiling eyes, he paused. Even his words were stuck in his throat. The Empress Dowager hesitated and was afraid. Li Helan, unaware, followed Marquis Qingyang out. Prince Li turned around and glanced at the Empress Dowager with a smile that wasn't a smile. His expression was like he had seen the most exciting part of a play, with interest and disdain. When Prince Li exited the hall, he heard Marquis Qingyang say, I haven't visited your residence in a long time. Do you mind if younger uncle strolls around your residence? In the past, Li Helan and his younger uncle had a very good relationship. Although Li Helan was now somewhat estranged from Marquis Qingyang because of the conflict of interests, he didn't find it novel at all when he heard this and immediately agreed. Prince Li raised an eyebrow. He didn't stop Marquis Qingyang, minding his own business as he went to the imperial study. At this time, it was already the time when the sky was filled with the glow of the sunset. Before the sunset, the most perfect and dazzling light was left in the world for people to linger on. The light of the sunset shone through the window, illuminating Prince Li's face as he sat behind the imperial table. After a moment, Prince Li beckoned to the chamberlain next to him. That chamberlain was tall and strong. If it weren't for the lack of beard on his chin, it would be difficult to determine that this person was a chamberlain. Act according to the original plan. Yes. The chamberlain immediately withdrew. He quickly went to instruct Prince Li on the matters arranged. The Empress Dowager was silently wiping her tears when Ci and palace was surrounded by people. The Empress Dowager anxiously asked, "What's wrong?" Replying to the Empress Dowager, it is said that Titan assassins have infiltrated the palace. Prince Li ordered us to protect the Empress Dowager's safety. The Empress Dowager's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but mutter, "They're here, they're finally here." At this time, the Empress Dowager had just finished eating dinner. Hearing a burst of noisy footsteps outside the palace gates, she couldn't help but find it strange. Not long after, Commander Prince Li barged in with his men without any prior notice. Imperial sister-in-law. Prince Li's voice dragged out each word. The Empress held her stomach and calmly said, "I don't know Prince Li. You came uninvited. What business do you have with me?" Prince Li chuckled. He casually found a chair and sat down, saying, "There is something I don't understand and would like to ask Imperial Sister-in-law." Chapter 631. Princely said with a smile, "I heard that when a pregnant woman is pregnant, the fetus and the mother will compete for nutrients. So I want to know, if the mother is in a desperate situation, will the limited nutrients be absorbed by the mother or stolen by the fetus?" The Empress' pupils shrank when she heard this. She angrily glared at Princely. Her mind was spinning and many curses were on the tip of her tongue, but the Empress desperately held them back. She couldn't be impulsive. What if she angered this evil thief and caused him to harm the child in her womb on the spot? She didn't have any hope for herself, but she had to do her best for the child. As long as Princely didn't immediately kill her, then she and the child still had hope. Commander Princely enjoyed the Empress's changing expression with interest. Seeing that she didn't beg for mercy in the end, nor did she fly into a rage, but instead silently lowered her eyes, Princely couldn't help but sigh. Tsk, I didn't think Imperial Sister-in-law had this kind of personality. I didn't see through you in these years. But to be worthy of being Li Qitian's Empress, your personality naturally isn't bad. He waved his hand and there was a rush of footsteps behind him. Jun Wang. Do it. Do it cleanly. Don't alarm anyone. Yes. The confidant immediately obeyed and led a group of people to bring all the palace servants of the Empress who had been forced to kneel on the ground and gagged, as well as the palace servants who had seen Princely come to the Empress palace. They were all brought to a corner and executed with their mouths covered. Soon, a well was filled. As for the Empress, all the food and water in the hall were taken out and thrown out. The Empress was pushed into the hall and then all the doors and windows were firmly sealed. Princely stood outside the door with his hands behind his back. The sky was completely dark and the stars illuminated the scene in front of him. His confidants and guards were neatly nailing wooden boards to the doors and windows. There were many people and their hands were fast. In a short while, the room where the Empress was imprisoned was turned into a cage that outsiders could see inside, but the pregnant woman couldn't come out. Princely moved closer to the window and looked at the silent Empress sitting on the warm Kong by the window. I really admire you for being so calm. I want to see how long you can remain calm. But you are much stronger than that old woman. The Empress Dowager was scared witless in the blink of an eye and knelt down to beg for mercy. The Empress almost blurted out a curse. But she told herself again and again that she couldn't be impulsive. She had to think about her child. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, she had to seize the opportunity. Therefore, the Empress still didn't provoke Princely. She just lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. Princely laughs out loud, "Good, not bad, I like a calm woman like you. Forget it, just stay here." Turning around, he ordered his trusted subordinates, as well as his trusted aides who had infiltrated the Jinwu guards and imperial bodyguards. A Taitan spy has infiltrated the palace. You must protect the Empress Dowager and the Empress well. This king still has to go to the imperial study to read memorials. If you have any news, remember to inform this king. Yes. Wang Yi. Everyone responded in unison. Princely glanced at the clear night sky, then walked quickly to the imperial study in high spirits. After tonight, there would be no more Li Qitian, no more Pang Xiao. Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshuan. Weren't they trapped in the underground palace and buried alive? If he was alive, he wanted to see him. If he was dead, he wanted to see his corpse. If it's easy, then I'll continue to excavate the underground palace. As for those people in the Wangfu, perhaps Prince Zhongshuan's wife and Prince Zhongshuan were deeply in love. In order to die for love, they set a fire and accidentally burned everyone in the Wangfu to death. Don't believe it. Then perhaps it was the Taitan's doing. In any case, Prince Zhongshuan's wife was the main culprit who killed Nari Khan. It wasn't impossible for them to come to seek revenge. Commander Princely had calculated everything and felt that his arrangement was flawless. He went to the imperial study proudly to wait for the news. At this time, the Wangfu had indeed fallen into a sea of fire. On a mountain not far from the Wangfu, Qin Yining was sitting cross-legged. He had already wrapped himself in a large fur cloak. There was a lot of dirt on his hair and body, but he was particularly spirited and didn't look out of place. Qin Yining looked at the Wangfu in front of him, which was on fire. He asked with some worry, "There won't be any casualties among the people you arranged, right?" Liao Zhibing's face was covered in dirt. The trusted subordinates of the Green Sky Alliance beside him were also covered in dirt. Everyone laughed when they heard this. Liao Zhibing said, "Alliance Master, don't worry. Our brothers may have made mistakes in other things, but this isn't a difficult matter. There are enough corpses left in the Wangfu. The tunnel is also hidden. Our brothers are all good at escaping, so we'll find an opportunity to withdraw." Qin Yining was relieved. "It's good that there won't be any casualties. Our brothers are all born and raised by their parents. There's no need for us to lose our lives for these things." They looked at each other with smiles on their faces. Liao Zhibing smiled and said, "Alliance Master, the night wind is cold. Why don't you go back first, so you don't get cold sitting here for too long? There's no rush. Let's take a look. The view here is very good. We can see the whole situation. If there's any change, we can remedy it." Liao Zhibing naturally knew that Qin Yining was right. He was only worried that Qin Yining's body wouldn't be able to take it. He lowered his head and glanced at her belly. It looked like she was about to give birth. If it happened on this mountain, who would be able to deliver the baby with a group of men and only 2 little girls? Liao Zhibing thought a lot, but he also thought the same thing when he saw Qin Yining's body. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were both wrapped in thick fur collars. Their faces were also like little kittens. They huddled close to Qin Yining to help keep her warm. Compared to outsiders, Bing Tang understood Qin Yining's body better. If there were no accidents, the 2 little rascals would have to stay in the princess consort's belly for another month. With so many people protecting them and not letting the princess consort tire, there wouldn't be any problems. Qin Yining didn't know what was going on in the minds of the people beside him. Qin Yining looked at the fire at the foot of the mountain. The 3 entrances and the garden of the Prince's Fu were all engulfed in a sea of fire. The surrounding commoners were shouting loudly and sounding gongs as they rushed to put out the fire. In the end, Qin Yining felt that it was a pity. Such a good home was gone just like that. Perhaps this was the first residence she lived in after getting married, so she had a lot of feelings for it. Although Jing was large, news traveled quickly. The weather was dry, and the Wangfu occupied a large area. After the fire, half the sky of the capital was red. The neighbors nearby all hurriedly evacuated their people. They watched as the people of the warden's office and the Water Dragon Bureau frantically tried to put out the fire, but to no avail. They could only watch as the fire grew more and more intense. The late autumn night wind in the north was cold, but the people around the Prince's Fu only felt their faces burning hot from the fire. The cold sweat on their bodies was then cooled by the cold wind. What should we do? What's wrong with the court? So many things have happened in Jing recently. Prince Zhongshuan is a great contributor. Are all the family members of the Prince Yu's mansion trapped inside? I haven't seen anyone escape. I heard that the princess consort is still pregnant. The surrounding people all sighed. Wang Ye's family, who had so many military achievements, was too pitiful. Although the imperial family didn't spread the news that Your Majesty was buried in the underground palace, it couldn't be stopped from spreading it outside. Who in the capital didn't know that your majesty was digging for some treasure? When he went to the underground palace to dig, the heavens punished him and the palace exploded. It collapsed, and even many of the court's ministers were buried. Recently, almost all of the high-ranking officials in the capital had a funeral. Prince Zhongshuan was one of them. Not to mention that he was buried in the underground palace and couldn't be rescued, even his prince's fu was burned down. Could it be that it was because this prince had killed too many people during his campaigns? The sound of discussion couldn't hide the crackling of wood. While people were putting out the fire and hiding from the disaster, a man quietly withdrew from the crowd. At this time, it was chaotic. How could they notice him when they were sleeping? In the imperial study, Prince Li was pacing back and forth. The polished marble floor made a clear sound when the soles of Commandery Prince Li's boots bumped against the polished marble floor. The sound of tap, tap was annoying. Looking at the sky, it was already the third watch. Why hadn't there been any good news from outside the palace? Just as Prince Li was anxiously waiting, the sound of footsteps came from outside, followed by a lowered male voice. "Royal Prince. Come in." Prince Li anxiously ordered. That person accepted the order and came in. He knelt on one knee and saluted, saying, "Wang Yi, it's done." Prince Li tightly clenched his sleeves. "Speak clearly." "Yes. Our people first tampered with the well water in the prince's fu and then killed their way in. There were only a few people who could resist. The rest were knocked unconscious and blocked in the room with a fire. Later." "Who asked you that?" Prince Li leaned forward and anxiously asked in a low voice, "I asked you, did that person get it?" Replying to the royal prince, he was already killed. "Killed?" "Yes." Prince Li slowly straightened his body. The smile on his face seemed to move in slow motion, slowly climbing to the corners of his eyes. "Good, good, very good." Prince Li took a few steps back and slumped into his chair. He only felt that his nerves, which had been stretched taut all day, suddenly relaxed. Only then did he realize that he was already drenched in sweat. Li Qitian was dead. Li Qitian, that self-proclaimed smart and arrogant guy, actually died like this. Prince Li's heart was incomparably carefree, and he laughed loudly. In the spacious imperial study, his laughter echoed like the sound of a bell. The subordinate half-knelt on the ground. Seeing Prince Li laugh, he also breathed a sigh of relief. After a moment, Prince Li's laughter seemed to have been strangled by someone, and it came to an abrupt stop. When the subordinate saw this, he immediately became nervous. "Wang Yi? That won't do. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." Prince Li stood up, saying, "Li Qitian is sinister and cunning. This king will only be at ease after confirming that he's truly dead. Make preparations, this king wants to leave the palace." "Wang Yi, I'm afraid this is not appropriate. The palace gates are currently closed. With such a big incident happening in the capital, this king is concerned about the court officials. It's normal for him to be concerned about the fire in Prince Zhongshuan's fu. Why can't he go? Stop being so long-winded and quickly go make preparations." Chapter 632. At this time, Qin Yining was still standing guard at the top of the mountain. The sky was a bit gloomy, and dark clouds covered the moon and stars. The entire capital seemed to be shrouded in a huge shadow. Only the fire in the prince's mansion was still burning, and thick smoke billowed into the night sky. The orange light of the fire was weaker than before, but it still looked like it could reignite at any time. Liao Zhibing whispered, "Alliance Master, we've waited for so long, but there's still no news from the palace. Will Prince Li not come out?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "Don't worry. From Prince Li's behavior these days, he must be a cautious and suspicious person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until all the doubts were resolved before revealing his true face. The matter in the prince's mansion was arranged by him. After his subordinates report, he will definitely come out and see for himself. Only when he sees your majesty's corpse with his own eyes can he be completely at ease. Liao Zhibing nodded. This prince is also a person of importance. Qin Yining only smiled and didn't say anything. Was Prince Li a person of importance? Maybe he was. However, to put it bluntly, he was nothing more than a short-sighted villain. The Tatan's Eugene Khan was not to be trifled with. He had already attacked Heaven's Gate, and the southern Yen was rising in the south. The Empress Dowager and Prince Li only looked at the benefits in front of them. They didn't think that once the Tatan's iron hooves stepped into the capital, even if they sat on the throne, what could they do? Facing Eugene Khan, the higher the position, the faster they would die. These people didn't think about fighting the enemy, and instead started to fight among themselves. Even she, as a woman, found it ridiculous. Everyone waited for a while, and suddenly a brother from the Qingtian Alliance came up the mountain. Alliance Master, Mr. Liao, Prince Li has already left the palace and is heading towards the prince's mansion. Everyone heard this and let out a sigh of relief. In any case, as long as Prince Li was willing to leave the palace, it was fine. Qin Yining stood up and stretched her legs with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Not only was her body heavy now, but because her stomach was too big, it was squeezing the organs in her abdomen. She needed to urinate after a while, but now she wanted to go again. Liao Zhibing led the alliance members and continued to stare at the foot of the mountain. Qin Yining went to solve the problem with the help of 2 maidservants. When he came back, he saw Xiaoyu and 2 familiar-looking guards standing together with Liao Zhibing. They were chatting. Mr. Xia. Qin Yining walked over slowly. Why are you here? Xiaoyu smiled and saluted, Your Highness. It was Wang Yi who was worried about you and asked me to bring some people to escort you back. It's getting late. Wang Yi is really worried about you being on the mountain. Qin Yining smiled and said, There are so many brothers on the mountain. My safety can be guaranteed. But it's not convenient for you. Xiaoyu persuaded, Now that the matter is more or less settled, it's better to leave. The brothers of the Qingtian Alliance should go back and tidy up and rest. Your Highness also needs a good night's sleep. Even if you don't look after Wang Yi, you still have to look after the 2 in your stomach. Qin Yining subconsciously rubbed her stomach. After thinking about it, Xiaoyu's words made sense. They could just leave 2 people here to take turns to observe the situation. There was no need for everyone to stay up all night. All right. Qin Yining nodded and said to Liao Zhibing, I'll have to trouble Mr. Liao to choose 2 brothers to stay behind and observe the situation. Liao Zhibing nodded and said, That's easy. Alliance Master can go with Wang Ye's people. I'll make some arrangements and take the rest of the brothers to rest. Qin Yining nodded and gave a few more instructions. Then, he rode down the mountain on a roller coaster and changed to a carriage. The fire at the Wang estate was too big of a commotion, so the patrols in the city were much more lax than before. Xiaoyu and 2 imperial bodyguards protected Qin Yining's carriage. Soon, they arrived at a private residence not far from the imperial palace. At this time, looking from outside the walls, the residence was no different from other residences. It was pitch black, and the owner was clearly sleeping. Xiaoyu rhythmically knocked on the door knocker. Not long after, someone came to answer the door. Qin Yining led the 2 servant girls and followed Xiaoyu into the pitch-black courtyard. They carefully arrived at the door of the residence. Someone opened the door and even lifted the curtains. A ray of bright light shone out. Qin Yining realized that there were curtains hanging on the doors and windows of the residence to block out the light. Your Majesty, the Prince Zhongshuan's consort, has returned. As soon as Qin Yining entered the residence, someone came in to report. She had just turned around the floor-to-ceiling screen when she saw Li Qitian sitting at the head of the table in the side hall. Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu were standing beside Li Qitian. Seeing Qin Yining enter, Li Qitian immediately stood up. Qin Yining curtsied to Li Qitian and said, "Long live your Majesty and be in good health." Li Qitian had already arrived in front of them. He raised his hands and said extremely politely, "You may dispense with the formalities. You've worked hard this time." She was not used to Li Qitian's courteous treatment of Qin Yining. Ever since this plan, Qin Yining had no choice but to reveal the trump card of the Qin-Tian alliance because of the lack of manpower. Li Qitian had shown her unprecedented respect and politeness. His attitude towards her was not like how one would treat an official's family member, but more like how one would treat one's own subordinates. Therefore, Qin Yining felt that Li Qitian was worthy of admiration. He really had his own way of using people. Qin Yining stood up and said with lowered eyes, "Your Majesty is overpraising me. This subject's wife doesn't dare to accept such praise. You're too modest. This time, it's all thanks to the efforts of your subordinates. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. After this matter is completed, I will definitely reward you handsomely. Contributing to your Majesty is contributing to the country. How could I dare to ask for any reward? Your Majesty shouldn't say such things." After the two sides exchanged some pleasantries, Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu's personal guards were all dumbfounded. Everyone couldn't help but think that Prince Zhongshuan's wife was really a powerful person. It was no wonder that Prince Zhongshuan was so infatuated with her. "Sit down and talk." Li Qitian smiled and gestured for them to sit down. Pang Xiao opened his mouth and asked Qin Yining to sit down beside him. Li Qitian asked, "How's the matter going? How's the situation outside?" Qin Yining said respectfully, "Replying to your Majesty, the matter outside is as expected. The fire in the prince's mansion has attracted enough attention. Prince Li has already led his men out of the palace." Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. "How are the arrangements on your side?" Pang Xiao smiled. "With your Majesty in charge, there's nothing that can't be done. Don't worry, everything has been arranged. I'm sure there will be good news soon." Ji Ziyu also nodded in agreement. Li Qitian smiled from the bottom of his heart. Although the situation was tense, he never lost his fighting spirit. Now everything is ready except for the east wind. Let's see how the news is from there. Everyone nodded in agreement. Pang Xiao stood up and said, "Your Majesty, I'll take my wife to wash up and rest first." Li Qitian smiled gently and said, "Go ahead. Thank you for your hard work today." Chapter 633. Qin Yining followed behind Pang Xiao to a side room. It was already late at night, and in order to prevent others from discovering their hiding place, only a silk lamp was lit in the room, and thick curtains were drawn over the doors and windows. Two large wooden buckets of hot water had already been prepared behind the screen. Pang Xiao helped Qin Yining to sit behind the screen, and his large hand with distinct joints helped her remove the grass clinging to her hair. "We have limited resources, so why don't we clean ourselves properly? You're so tired that you still have to crawl through the tunnel. It really makes me feel bad." Qin Yining took the hot handkerchief Pang Xiao handed to her to wipe her face. The situation was tense now, and it was not the time for her to be fussy. She did not mind that she could not take a thorough bath. Don't think like that. Although the tunnel is narrow, it's not particularly difficult to walk through. Besides, it's better to be covered in dirt than to be injured. A cold glint flashed across Pang Xiao's eyes. "Let's see who dares to hurt you." Qin Yining was amused by his protective manner and stuffed the handkerchief back to him. Don't be nervous. I'm right under your nose. Who has the ability to hurt me? Besides, we're considered to be strong allies this time. You, Your Majesty, and Marquis Dingbei are all good at scheming. This plan is the most direct and fastest choice. I believe that by this time tomorrow, everything will return to normal. Pang Xiao washed the handkerchief, took Qin Yining's fair and delicate hands, and clumsily wiped them for her. Anyway, I can only be calm when you're by my side. If I'm not with you, I don't know what to do. Qin Yining's heart was filled with waves of warmth. She looked at him with a smile. You're such a glib talker. A man's ambition is to travel far. If your subordinates heard what you said today, let's see if they'll still be convinced by you in the future. Pang Xiao threw the handkerchief away, hugged Qin Yining, and bit the corner of her mouth. If they're not convinced, I'll just beat them up. I just want to give you a period of peace. Wang Yi. Before Qin Yining could reply, a servant outside the door said in a low voice, Bodyguard Deng is back. Pang Xiao's expression froze. Got it. He turned around and said to Qin Yining, Huzi is back. I've arranged for him to go to the palace. You can sleep in your room for a while. I'll go to your Majesty's place to listen to the situation. Qin Yining said, I'm not sleepy at all right now. I can't sleep with such a big matter on my mind. Let me go with you. Seeing Qin Yining's firm attitude, Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh. All right. Anyway, I originally planned to stay with you and never let you out of my sight. Let's go. Qin Yining nodded and was supported by Pang Xiao back to the council chamber. Huzi was kneeling on one knee and reporting to Li Qitian. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Your Majesty's prophecy is divine. The Prince Regent really left the palace. I took people and immediately took back the palace. Good. Li Qitian was a bit excited, and his voice couldn't help but rise. What's the situation in the palace? Replying to Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager was besieged and frightened, but it's not serious. The Empress was locked in the Cunning Palace. Prince Li ordered people to board up the doors and windows, and didn't leave anything for the Empress to eat or drink. Fortunately, the Empress has a strong temperament and wasn't too agitated. The Empress and the dragon fetus are safe and sound. As soon as they heard that Prince Li actually locked up the pregnant Empress and didn't give her food or drink, everyone present frowned. Especially Qin Yining. As a pregnant woman, she understood the hardships of pregnancy the most. If she was locked up without food or drink at this time, it would be very easy for her to collapse. The fact that the Empress was safe and sound was enough to show that her temperament was very tenacious. Li Qitian suppressed a fire in his heart. He couldn't bear Prince Li's various evil deeds. He only thought that he must eat his flesh and sleep on his skin to vent his hatred. However, now that the strategy of luring the tiger away from the mountain had worked and the palace had been taken back, it wasn't impossible to take down Prince Li, Jin knows. Sure enough, the people around Shiji are very capable and can lead the troops of Prince Zhongshuan's and Prince Consort's manor back to the palace. Zhen will give you a great merit. Huzi hurriedly said, this commoner doesn't dare to claim credit. It's just that after we entered the palace, we only needed to show the banner of Your Majesty when we encountered resistance. Most people would join us against a common enemy. It can be seen that Prince Li only took down a small number of people. Most people still hold Your Majesty in high esteem and are looking forward to Your Majesty's return. These words made Li Qitian feel very comfortable. During these days of wandering about, everything Li Qitian owned, including his life, was almost taken away. He really couldn't accept losing again and again. Now that someone told him that there were still people willing to continue to be loyal to him, the joy brought by this news was equivalent to telling him that he had successfully taken back the palace. Li Qitian reached out his hands to help Huzi up. Huzi was overwhelmed by this favor and repeatedly said, "This commoner doesn't dare." Huzi was Pang Zhao's imperial bodyguard. He was no longer a member of the army and had no official rank in the imperial court. Pang Zhao saw that Li Qitian didn't ask, so he asked worriedly, "How are the casualties in the palace?" This time, the people Huzi brought with him were all trusted aides of Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu. Excluding these people, the palace's Yulin guards, Jinwu guards, and other people were all living beings. If the soldiers fought the Titan and spilled blood on the battlefield, Pang Zhao would be distressed, but he wouldn't be so impatient. However, the problem was that this time's sacrifice was due to side issues. Huzi said, replying to Wang Yi, "The casualties in the palace are still okay. There aren't many." Then it wasn't a small number. Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu lowered their eyes at the same time. They felt very uncomfortable in their hearts. Li Qitian said with a smile, "I will heavily reward those who help take back the throne. Those who contributed this time will be heavily rewarded." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Several people bowed and responded in a low voice. In Li Qitian's eyes, even if all the people who attacked the palace died, there wouldn't be more than 1,000 people. Moreover, these were the elites of Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu. It would be better if they died. For a battle to take back the throne, he felt that the sacrifice of 1,000 people was very little. Li Qitian stood in high spirits with his hands behind his back. Although there were dark curtains blocking the light in front of him, he felt as if he was in the throne room and everything was under his control. Today is the day of the imperial court meeting. Have you notified the people to go to court? Pang Zhao said, replying to Your Majesty, we have already thought of a way to notify them. Very good. Everyone. Li Qitian suddenly turned around and said proudly, follow me back to the palace. Yes. After the order was given, everyone left the antechamber without hesitation. A spacious carriage had already been prepared in front of the courtyard gate. Several Jinghu Wei lined up neatly on the left and right. Li Qitian boarded the carriage first. Then he reached out his hand to Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu and said with a smile, my two brothers, follow me into the carriage. Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu looked at each other. They didn't refuse and jumped into the carriage one after another. Li Qitian looked at the pot-bellied Qin Yining and said with a smile, sister-in-law, get in the carriage too. Chapter 634. Qin Yining's body was heavy, so she naturally wouldn't make things difficult for herself. She immediately knelt down to express her gratitude. Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and help your wife up. Li Qitian didn't even allow her to finish her bow. He urged Pang Zhao to get up. His tone was intimate, as if he was his own brother. Pang Zhao smiled and agreed. He simply jumped down from the carriage and easily carried Qin Yining to the carriage. Then, he sat down next to her. The carriage was very spacious, so there was still a lot of space for 4 people. Li Qitian sat upright in his seat. Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu talked in a low voice the entire way. During this time, they didn't neglect Qin Yining. Qin Yining could tell that after being forced to reveal his power, Li Qitian no longer viewed her as an official's wife. Instead, he viewed her as a capable subordinate on the same level as Pang Zhao and Ji Ziyu. Not long after, the group of people successfully entered the palace. Qin Yining couldn't help but lift the curtains and look outside. In the dark night, there were dark brown marks on the red palace walls and floor tiles. There were even corpses of palace servants and imperial bodyguards that hadn't been cleaned up in time. The wooden carriage wheels rolled on the silent palace road, making a series of noises. Because of the pitch-black surroundings and the smell of blood, everything seemed eerie and strange. A place like the Imperial Palace had always accumulated resentment. Sister E, don't look. Pang Xiao held Qin Yining's shoulders and straightened her body. At this time, except for Li Qitian, none of the other 3 people in the carriage felt good. In Li Qitian's eyes, such casualties were not worth mentioning. He would even think that it was worth it to kill these people to take back the throne. In fact, the plan that Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had come up with was indeed the least costly way to take back the city. However, when they saw the blood-stained brick walls and ground, and even people like Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu saw with their own eyes that their close subordinates had died in such a conspiracy for power, but their blood was not spilled on the battlefield. The pain in their hearts was not something that others could understand. Your Majesty. Outside the carriage, Huzi said, the Empress is in the Empress Dowager's palace right now. Your Majesty, do you want to go to the Imperial Study or the Ci and Palace to pay respects to the Empress Dowager? Li Qitian looked at the sky, thought for a while, and then said, of course I have to pay respects to the Empress Dowager first. Yes. Huzi ordered, prepare the carriage for Ci and Palace. The carriage followed the palace road to Ci and Palace. The guards in front of Ci and Palace saw a spacious and gorgeous carriage slowly coming in surrounded by guards from afar, and they all went forward to salute. A clever eunuch stepped back a few steps, turned around, and ran to the Empress Dowager to deliver the message. He cheered loudly, Empress Dowager, Empress, Your Majesty is back. At this time, the Empress Dowager was guarding a silk lamp. She took a cold handkerchief from a palace servant and pressed it on her eyes that were swollen from crying. Hearing this, she stood up excitedly and almost overturned the palace lamp. What did you say? Is it really Your Majesty? If you dare to deceive me, I will kill you. This servant doesn't dare to lie. Your Majesty is really back. The little eunuch was so scared that he knelt down with a plop. The Empress had already stood up and walked to the palace door with the help of the palace servants beside her. Tears kept rolling in her eyes. Your Majesty is back. It's really him. The Empress had never been so shocked in her life. First, she was nailed to death in her own palace by Prince Li. He even said that he would starve her to death without food or water. If her mind wasn't so strong, she might have committed suicide in despair on the spot. She didn't expect that she would grit her teeth and persist. She didn't even have the chance to carry out the method she thought of to survive. That night, Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu subordinates killed their way into the palace and rescued her. The Empress was very grateful to Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. She now understood. When Your Majesty was trapped in the underground palace, only Ji Ziyu was willing to put in so much effort. He stayed on the mountain and swore that he wouldn't go down until he rescued Your Majesty. From the Empress Dowager's words, the Empress learned that Qin Yining came to the palace today to deliver a letter for Your Majesty. In addition, now that the Imperial Palace has been recaptured, Your Majesty has safely returned to the palace. It was clear who was right and who was wrong, who was evil and who was evil. If it weren't for Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao, she and the child in her belly would probably have died. Could she hope that she would be so scared that she would lose her mind? That her extremely selfish mother-in-law would come to save her? The Empress's eyes darkened. She held her waist and walked out. The Empress Dowager was faster than her. The Empress Dowager, who had been so scared that her legs were trembling, now walked like the wind. Her movements were comparable to that of a young eunuch. My son is fine. The Empress Dowager excitedly rushed to the front of Ci and Palace and saw Qin Yining get off the carriage with Pang Xiao's help. Then, Ji Ziyu lightly jumped down. Li Qitian finally stepped on the footstool with the help of 2 officials. My son. The Empress Dowager opened her arms and rushed over. She hugged Li Qitian and said, "My son, you want your mother's life. I thought you were already. If you didn't come back, your mother wouldn't want to live." The sadness and sorrow that had accumulated for many days were all vented at this moment. The Empress Dowager cried so much that even the imperial guards felt moved. The Empress stood not far away, holding her belly. She looked at all of this and felt that it was funny. Did the Empress Dowager think that everyone was blind? Was she worried about her son? Maybe she was worried. But her son's life was not as important as her life, not as important as the glory of her family. Now, she showed such a face, which made people feel that it was ridiculous. Li Qitian smiled and patted the Empress Dowager's back. "Imperial Mother, I came back safely. You should be happy. Imperial Mother, don't be sad." The Empress Dowager patted Li Qitian's back and squeezed his arm. "My son has lost weight. You've lost so much weight." Li Qitian smiled and said, "It's already hard for me to keep my life. Imperial Mother, don't cry." "Yes, Empress Dowager." The Empress smiled and came forward. "Your Majesty and 2 brothers have worked hard. Let's sit down and talk about what happened after we parted." Hearing how the Empress Dowager addressed Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao, Li Qitian immediately felt that they were of the same mind. Looking at the Empress Dowager's belly, which was bigger than he remembered, he nodded with satisfaction and said, "Zitong is right. It's late at night and cold. It won't be good if Imperial Mother catches a cold. Let's go in and talk." The Empress Dowager had no choice but to nod. With Li Qitian's help, she sobbed all the way into the hall. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao walked side by side at the back. The night wind blew away the thick smell of blood, but Qin Yining's senses were sharp. The thick smell of blood that she saw along the way still made her feel suffocated. Pang Xiao put an arm around her shoulder and whispered with heartache, "Are you not feeling well? Later, I'll get someone to find a room and let Bing Tang and Ji Yun wait on you to rest. With your current body, how can you endure staying up all night?" Qin Yining was indeed a bit tired. Looking at the sky, she said, "It's fine. I still want to stay by your side. It's safer." Pang Xiao agreed, "You're right. The palace isn't completely safe. Hold on a bit longer. We can rest in peace once we're done." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. Just as Li Qitian and the others were discussing the recent situation in the capital with the Empress Dowager and the Empress, Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang were at Prince Zhongshuan's residence, inspecting the situation. The fire had just been extinguished. The charred ruins were still smoking. In some places, the original outlines could still be seen. Charred corpses were placed on the ground. Many of them had been burned to the point that they had shriveled up. It could only be seen that they were originally people. In front of Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang was a male corpse whose body was charred black, but whose facial outline could still be considered complete. Seeing Li Qitian's familiar face that was half charred and lying on the ground, Prince Li almost laughed out loud. Li Qitian was dead. All the people in Pang Zhao's residence were buried with him. It was really satisfying. In this way, his ascension to the throne was justified. He was originally Li Qitian's younger cousin. In times of crisis, he was entrusted by the Empress Dowager to supervise the country. The emperor was on his way. Who could say no to his ascension to the throne? What's more, the situation in the court was tense. He believed that his ascension to the throne would give the court officials a backbone. No one would be unwilling. When the time came, he would arrange for the Tiger Army to rescue Heaven's Gate Pass and drive the Taiden out of Dezhou. His position would be even more stable. Thinking of this, Prince Li pursed his lips and gritted his teeth. He forced a sorrowful appearance and ordered the people around him, "Deal with these corpses. Carry this one out." We're going back to see the Empress Dowager. Yes. His trusted subordinates moved quickly. They ignored the rest of the corpses and temporarily didn't care about the charred corpses. They found a wooden board and only carried out Li Qitian's corpse. The sky was dark. Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang silently walked through the scorched prince's estate. Their moods were very high. Unexpectedly, when they arrived at the gate, Prince Li and Marquis Qingyang saw many officials' palanquins and carriages heading in the direction of the imperial palace. In the prince's estate's location, there were many neighbors who were officials in the court. Looking at the sky, it was almost time for the morning court. But as the regent, how come he didn't remember requesting to attend court today? Marquis Qingyang asked doubtfully, did the royal prince arrange for morning court today? Wasn't it said that something happened to your majesty and many court officials were injured, so the court was temporarily suspended for repairs? Prince Li was also very puzzled. This king did arrange for repairs. That's strange. I'll go ask. Marquis Qingyang was about to chase after a carriage in front of him, but he was pulled back by Prince Li. You can't ask like that. Prince Li gave a meaningful glance to the person behind him. The attendant behind him immediately understood and went to inquire. Prince Li then said, this king was ordered by the empress to be the regent. How could he not know about the morning court? If you ask like this, wouldn't you be telling others that this king doesn't know anything? Only then did Marquis Qingyang come to his senses. He smiled a bit awkwardly. I was impatient. Prince Li rolled his eyes but didn't say anything. Not long after, the attendant quickly walked back and said in a low voice, Royal Prince, it is said that all the officials were following orders. Today's court will be held as usual. This king is here. Whose orders were they following? Prince Li narrowed his eyes. Could it be that old witch? He didn't think that the cowardly Empress Dowager in front of him would have this kind of method. Chapter 635. The retainer did not find out who had ordered the ministers to attend court. Seeing his master angry, he naturally did not dare to say a word. Marquis Qingyang rubbed his inexplicably cold forehead and said in a low voice, things aren't right. Could it be that something has gone wrong? Impossible. This king's plan was flawless. How could there be a flaw at this time? The Empress Dowager must have deceived us. Prince Li gnashed his teeth. Marquis Qingyang waved his hand with a wry smile. Impossible. Do you think I don't know my older sister's personality? Moreover, the royal prince also saw it. She is timid and an ordinary woman. She can't cause any waves. Prince Li's anxiety and anger were forcefully suppressed. He turned his head to look at the charred ruins of the estate and then looked at the corpse that had been carried out by the retainer and placed in the carriage. Commander Prince Li did not know what was going on. Suddenly, he had an idea. He strode toward the carriage and observed it carefully. Marquis Qingyang furrowed his brows and pinched his nose as he also walked over. What is the royal prince doing? What is there to look at in a dead person? Prince Li completely ignored the noisy Marquis Qingyang. He took a lamp from his retainer and used the weak light of dawn to carefully examine Li Qitian's face. In the end, he discovered that there was something wrong with the burnt skin. Prince Li's heart skipped a beat. Without caring whether it was dirty or not, he reached out to grab at the corpse's face. Marquis Qingyang thought that Prince Li was overly nervous and cried out in alarm, "What are you doing?" Before he could finish speaking, he saw that Prince Li had already peeled off the skin on the corpse's face. The thin layer of skin was still burned with ash and blood. Under the orange light of the lantern, it appeared particularly frightening. But even more frightening was still to come. Under the skin was another unfamiliar face. That was not Li Qitian at all. Prince Li blankly clutched the tattered skin mask in his hand. His entire body shivered and the hairs on his back stood on end. How could it be fake? If Li Qitian was not dead, then what was the cause of the fire in the mansion? That's right, the charred corpses in the prince's mansion were barely recognizable as human bones. It was impossible to tell whether they were male or female. Therefore, there might not be any female members of the prince's mansion among them. There was something strange about the fire in the mansion. Li Qitian's corpse was fake, and the ministers came to court for no reason. When these 3 points were connected, even if Prince Li was an idiot, he would still be able to understand. He had been tricked. The fire this time had planned everything. The other party had grasped his mentality tightly and lured him out of the palace with a plot to beat him at his own game. At this time, Li Qitian might have already taken back the imperial palace. Prince Li's whole body trembled like a sieve, and he almost couldn't stand straight. The Marquis of Qingyang was no better than Prince Li. His mind was filled with Li Qitian's viciousness and majesty. What should we do? What should we do? If your majesty returns, would there be any good outcome for the two of us? Your plan definitely won't be able to escape. Even I will be finished with you. Your majesty cares about military power the most. Didn't you see that Pang Zhixie's military power was taken away? I, the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army, refuse to listen to your majesty's decree to support Tianmenguan. If your majesty knew, he would punish me for neglecting my duty. Prince Li's expression was gloomy, and the trembling of his body gradually calmed down. The Marquis of Qingyang anxiously said, "The only thing we can do now is quickly enter the palace and beg my sister. My sister is the Empress Dowager. If we say a few good words in front of your majesty, we might still be saved." Prince Li suddenly looked at the Marquis of Qingyang and coldly said, "If you want to throw yourself into a trap, go yourself. Did you forget how you treated the Empress Dowager? The Empress Dowager's brain isn't filled with water. If I see you now, I will definitely ruthlessly retaliate. Also, how will you see the Empress Dowager? Since Li Qitian has the ability to announce a court appearance, that means he has already taken back the imperial palace. As long as the two of us approach, we will be directly captured and sent to Li Qitian before we even see the Empress Dowager." The Marquis of Qingyang's face turned deathly pale. He felt as if the sky was about to collapse. How did things develop to this point? Everything was originally fine, so why did it all suddenly turn into bubbles? Then what do you think we should do? The Marquis of Qingyang was already in a mess. He could only look at Prince Li. Prince Li gritted his teeth and immediately said, "In for a penny, in for a pound." In any case, quite a few Tatar spies have sneaked in. Otherwise, Li Qitian wouldn't have been buried alive. Right now, who knows if there are Tatar spies hiding in the palace walls, wanting to harm the Empress Dowager and Empress. You're saying, you want to attack the imperial palace? The Marquis of Qingyang was shocked and lowered his voice. Prince Li said, "Either wait for death or take a gamble. If you want to die, I won't stop you. I can guarantee that as long as you approach the palace walls, you will immediately be tied up and sent to Li Qitian. At that time, how you die will not be up to you." The Marquis of Qingyang shivered. His eyes gradually turned from panic to determination. "Good, then let's take a gamble. Don't forget, this Marquis is currently the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army." Seeing the Marquis of Qingyang so tactful, Prince Li inwardly let out a sigh of relief. He turned around and ordered, "There are Tatar spies who have sneaked into the imperial palace and pretended to be your majesty with bad intentions. Immediately dispatch all the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office. We have to protect the Empress Dowager, protect the Empress Dowager, and protect the unborn dragon son." "Yes." Prince Li's loyal subordinates immediately went to the 5 cities warden's office to report this. The 5 cities warden's office was in charge of the capital security and other matters. The soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office added up to at least 10,000 people. In addition, the Marquis of Qingyang had dispatched the Tiger Army. With such an offensive, it wasn't impossible for them to fight with all their might. At this time, in Heavenly Worship Palace, all of the capital's civil and military officials above the 5th rank were already standing in line. Everyone was actually very uncomfortable in their hearts. Prince Li was the imperial relative chosen by the Empress Dowager to be regent. Although his personality was normally a bit soft, he still knew when to advance and retreat. As a regent, he had never made any arrangements to attend court. Why did he suddenly change his personality today? The officials all had grave expressions, their gazes pensive. Your Majesty and Prince Xiongxuan had already been buried for 21 days. What kind of person could persist for so many days without eating or drinking? The heavens of Dezhou had probably already changed. They just didn't know why Prince Li had summoned them to court today. Among the officials, there were already some who were considering which side to side with. There were also some who were loyal to Li Qitian and were full of anger. For a moment, all of the officials' expressions were unsightly. At this time, a sharp voice unique to the officials came from outside. Your Majesty has arrived. According to the rules, officials couldn't raise their heads to look directly at the emperor's face during court. Although all of the officials had a lot of complaints about Prince Li daring to call himself Your Majesty, not a single person disobeyed the rules at this time. Out of the corner of everyone's eyes, they saw a figure wearing a bright yellow dragon robe sitting on the dragon throne. The officials with their heads lowered couldn't see the appearance of the person sitting on the dragon throne. They could only see a pair of brand new golden coiling dragon boots. As expected, Prince Li had disloyal intentions. He wanted to rebel. Thinking back to the fire at Prince Xiongxuan's residence yesterday, the officials all connected the dots. It seemed that Prince Li really couldn't wait any longer. At this time, a few people understood and willingly knelt down and shouted, "Long live Your Majesty." But there was also a portion of people who believed that Prince Li's actions were the actions of a traitor. They would rather die than admit that Prince Li had privately proclaimed himself emperor. As a result, the officials' salutes were all different. Those who had been bribed by Prince Li or those who wanted to protect themselves all knelt down and kowtowed. As for the stubborn old officials and the imperial censors who didn't fear death, they only stood with their heads lowered and slightly bent their knees. Long live Your Majesty! Everyone's voices were all over the place. Sitting upright on the throne, Li Qitian looked down at the officials who were saluting him with completely different postures. He couldn't help but feel comforted in his heart. Those who directly knelt down and said, "Long live Your Majesty," only accounted for 20% of the total number of people. Those who refused to say, "Long live Your Majesty," and refused to kneel down made up 80% of the total number of people. It seemed that his throne was still very stable. Even though he had disappeared for 20 days and people outside were saying that he had died, these loyal officials still didn't immediately recognize Prince Li. Li Qitian carefully remembered who knelt and who didn't kneel. Then he jokingly said, "What, you old fellows still don't kneel when you see me? Do you want to rebel?" Li Qitian's voice was loud and clear, echoing throughout the hall. When the officials with their heads lowered heard this familiar voice, they ignored the rule of not looking directly at Li Qitian's face and raised their heads one after another. They saw Li Qitian wearing an imperial robe and sitting upright on the dragon throne. Behind him, Peng Xiao and Ji Ziyu stood on his left and right. Surprisingly, there was also a beautiful pregnant woman standing next to Prince Xiongxuan. "Your Majesty!" Everyone cried out in surprise. Li Qitian smiled and said, "Look, we have returned. Long live Your Majesty, long live Your Majesty. Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." This old official already knew that Your Majesty would definitely return safely. The officials all knelt down and saluted. There were even some who were so excited that tears streamed down their faces. In the midst of everyone's salutes, the 20% who first knelt down and recognized Princely were already trembling on both knees. It's over, the person who shouldn't have returned is back. Wouldn't the next step be to purge them? At this time, they no longer cared about why there were other than Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao behind Your Majesty, and even women standing together. They only wanted to think of a way to survive. They absolutely could not let Your Majesty think that they were all plotting a rebellion. Rebellion was a serious crime that could bring disaster to the entire clan. Just as everyone was feeling uneasy, the newly arrived Grand Eunuch Xiong Jinshui loudly announced, Your Majesty has decreed that if there is something to report, report it early. If there is nothing to report, dismiss the court. As soon as these words were spoken, all the officials let out a sigh of relief. Your Majesty did not resolve the issue of rebellion during the court meeting. Instead, he only asked about the state's affairs. Where else could one find Your Majesty who placed state affairs as the most important thing? As a result, everyone seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and reported all the things that had accumulated during Li Qitian's absence. They even discussed it in the court. Chapter 636. Li Qitian was someone who could keep his composure. In Qin Yining's view, anyone who could not keep their composure would be punished if they were in Li Qitian's position. But just like how Li Qitian was able to suppress his fear of Pang Xiao for so many years, it was only after Pang Xiao returned from the Taiten that Li Qitian felt that his preparations were foolproof, that he ordered the impeachment. In the past, Li Qitian had always been able to endure and put on an act. Now, Li Qitian was using this ability on the people they were dealing with together. Qin Yining was somewhat tired. He quietly changed his standing position, shifting his weight to his other foot. When Pang Xiao, who was standing next to him, saw him move, he immediately went over to support him, allowing Qin Yining to lean on his body. Qin Yining was somewhat resistant. After all, they were standing in front of all the officials. The people below could see them as soon as they raised their heads. But Pang Xiao only held on to her, not letting go. He put his arm around her shoulders and adjusted her posture, allowing her to lean on him more comfortably. Qin Yining knew that Pang Xiao did not care about the gazes of outsiders. He felt helpless and warm in his heart, so he no longer struggled. He calmly leaned on him and listened to the memorials between the officials and Li Qitian. The officials' memorials were mainly about the war with the Taiten in the north. Because Marquis Qingyang claimed to be ill, the matter of sending reinforcements to Heaven's Gate has been put on hold. Now, Heaven's Gate's Dragon Stallion army is in a critical situation. I ask that Your Majesty make a decision as soon as possible. This official agrees. This official agrees. Li Qitian slowly nodded. He was well aware of Marquis Qingyang's temperament. The Empress Dowager's train of thought was correct in wanting to grasp both military power and political power, but her judgment in choosing people was truly too poor. We understand this matter. The matter of sending reinforcements to Heaven's Gate must be carried out. Everyone, Li Qitian's words were not finished, and his voice slowly weakened. Everyone also listened carefully, only to vaguely hear that there seemed to be noise outside the heavenly worship hall. Your Majesty, Pang Xiao said in a low voice, there seems to be fighting outside. When these words came out, the officials were in an uproar. What's going on? Could it be that thieves are stirring up trouble? The officials saw the traces left behind from the fierce battle in the palace. In addition, the fire last night's palace and Your Majesty's sudden return. The most important thing was that there would occasionally be eunuchs walking around outside during the court sessions, making it convenient for them to pass on orders. What should we do now? Some of the officials asked in panic. Li Qitian's expression was deep as he said, it's fine. The palace's Yulin guards and Jinwu guards are not to be trifled with. Even if there are thieves and rascals who dare to break into the palace is easy to defend and difficult to attack. People outside cannot break in. My dear officials, do not panic. It is important to continue to study the war in the north with us. Seeing that Li Qitian was so calm, the ministers had a backbone in their hearts. Li Qitian never did anything he wasn't sure of. Since he was able to hold his ground, it meant that he had been prepared. Therefore, the 20% of people who supported Prince Li at the beginning were now even more nervous. They almost directly knelt to Li Qitian. On the other hand, those who were loyal and devoted, or who acted cautiously and didn't kneel to salute, were slightly relaxed. Li Qitian continued to discuss the matters of the northern frontier with his ministers. In Qin Yining's view, Li Qitian's calmness could really play a calming role for the officials. But was the palace really okay? Qin Yining's gaze fell on the wide-open doors of the palace hall. In front of the spacious palace hall, the great Han generals stood like javelins. The plaza was empty and not a single person was moving. Moreover, the sounds of fighting and killing seemed to have become clearer. An hour ago. Prince Li led the warden's office of the 5 cities, as well as passers-by from the east, west, south, and north of the city. A total of 8,000 people gathered outside the palace walls. The warden's office of the 5 cities was responsible for the security of the imperial city. Naturally, there was a large number of people. The people who could be mobilized were all gathered in one place. Prince Li pointed in the direction of the palace and said bitterly, "Last night, thieves broke into the capital and set fire to Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Today, this prince has personally checked and found that none of Prince Zhongshuan's family members were spared. They were all killed by the thieves." Everyone was silent. A sorrowful atmosphere spread through the crowd. The warden's office of the 5 cities was also a soldier. As long as they were a soldier or a man, there was no one who didn't admire Pang Zhao's bravery and fighting skills. Now that a famous general of a generation was trapped in the underground palace, he might have already become a corpse. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, disaster would fall from the sky? Wang Fei and Wang Ye's family members would also be killed. Wang Fei was also pregnant with twins, Wang Ye's blood. Everyone's heart was filled with sadness, which then turned into anger. Prince Li shouted with all his might, Prince Zhongshuan's residence was burned to a crisp by the thieves. This king investigated and found that it was done by the Taitan. Everyone knows about the grudges between us and the Taitan. The most hateful thing is that they took advantage of this king's absence to rush in and occupy the palace. The crowd burst into an uproar. The Taitan were too savage. They broke through 3 checkpoints at the border and stopped at Tianmen Pass. Not only did they kill Prince Zhongshuan's family members when they entered the capital, they even occupied the palace. In the palace, other than the Empress Dowager, there was the Empress and the concubines. The Empress and Prince Zhongshuan's concubine were the same. They were both pregnant and could be pregnant with the future emperor. At this moment, the crowd was immediately stirred up. Prince Li's goal was achieved. He pointed to the palace and said, "Today, the spies occupied the palace. We must drive the spies out. Otherwise, wouldn't the foundation of the country be shaken?" Soldiers charged together with this king. When the warden's office of the 5 cities heard this, they immediately led their men to the gates of the palace. They were prepared to attack in one fell swoop, take down the thieves, and protect the imperial family. Seeing that these people were willing to go, Commander Prince Li was relieved and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as these idiots were willing to listen to his arrangements, they could attack Li Qitian today and kill him. In the future, De Zhou's country would be his. As long as he could obtain that position, all his problems would be solved. He wouldn't have to fear Li Qitian's revenge, nor would he have to be afraid of being cursed. Under his flawless plan, Li Qitian would definitely be assassinated by the Titan spies. The gates of the palace were tightly shut. On the high outer wall of the main gate, the guards from Jinghu Wei saw the people of the 5 cities' warden's office gathered outside the gate. They turned pale with fright and ordered all the palace gates to be strictly guarded. The leader of the generals began to shout, "Who are you? You actually dare to trespass into the palace? Do you not want the weapons on your necks anymore?" The people of the 5 cities' warden's office had already determined that the palace was controlled by Titan spies. The people who were speaking now must have become Titan lackeys. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.